folks, we are live, so really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. I would like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone that's here in attendance. The committee has under consideration the estimates for the Ministry Economy and Trade, Jobs, Economy and Trade, JET, as it's known in-house, for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. I'd like that we go around the table, have the members introduce themselves for the record. Minister, if you could introduce your officials once we do that. And to get this started, I'll introduce myself, MLA Lac St. Anne Parkland, Shane Getson, better known around these parts as God's Country. And we'll go to members starting to my right.
Hi, Justin Wright, MLA for the charming constituency of Cypress Medicine.
Chantal de Jong, MLA for Chestermere Strathmore.
Scott Sear, MLA Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul.
Tanny, Fort McMurray Wood, Buffalo.
Jason Stephan, Red Deer South.
Matt Jones, Minister of Jobs, Economy, Trade, and MLA for Calgary Southeast. And to my left, we have ADM Tanis Liebrick, Assistant Deputy Minister of Childcare Strategy, Policy and Delivery. Chris McPherson, my Deputy Minister. And to my right, Andre Rivet, Acting Senior Financial Officer, and Suzanne Harbottle, ADM of Labour and Workforce Strategies. I do have additional staff, which I will highlight in my speaking remarks.
MLA Gurinder Brar, MLA from Calgary Northeast.
Peggy Wright, MLA for Edmonton Beverly Clareview.
Nathan Ip, MLA for Edmonton Southwest.
Diana Batten, MLA for Calgary Acadia.
Good evening, Heather Sweet, MLA, Edmonton Manning, Deputy Chair.
Perfect. And I don't believe we have anyone online or would be doing those introductions, so we'll just pass that. I'd like to note the following substitutions for the record. So Ms. Heather Sweet is in for Member Leola as Deputy Chair. So welcome aboard, Deputy. A few housekeeping items before we turn to the business at hand. As you've noticed around the room, Hansard is running and operating the microphone, so no need to reach out and grab those and try to manipulate them. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream transcripts of the meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Remote participants, we can pass that. If you need to get the committee members' attention or the clerk, he's to my left here. You can raise your hand in here, obviously, or send an email or anything else if you need his attention for whatever reason. Please set your cell phones to the least disturbing mode that's available since we're in a meeting. So please set them to silent for the duration of the meeting. Speaking times and limits. So I apologize, everybody. I'm terrible at reading notes, but this is one of those times where I have to read it into the record, so please bear with me. Honourable members, the main estimates for the Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Trade shall be considered for 3 hours. Standing Order 59.01 sets out the process for consideration of the main estimates in the Legislative Policy Committees. Suborder 59.016 sets out the speaking rotation for this meeting. The speaking rotation chart is available on the committee's internal website, and hard copies have been placed on the tables in front of you for those sitting at the table here. For each segment of the meeting, blocks of speaking time will be combined only if both minister and member speaking agree. If debate is exhausted prior to 3 hours, the ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted the main estimates schedule, and the committee will adjourn. Should members have any questions regarding speaking times or rotation, please email or message the committee clerk about the process, again, to my left. With the concurrence of the committee, I'm hopefully we can get our first consensus in this. I'd sure like a 5-minute break halfway at the halfway mark. If the committee does agree to that, the shot clock for the overall meeting will still continue to run, but we'll actually have a 5-minute chance for a comfort break. Is anyone against having a comfort break partway or halfway through the meeting? Seeing none, perfect. Thank you very much. The chair is very appreciative of that. Ministry officials who are present today at the direction of the minister address the committee. Ministry officials seated in the gallery, if called upon, have access to the microphone in the gallery. And folks in the gallery, introduce yourselves prior to the recording or at the podium so it's recorded for the record. Pages are available to deliver notes and other materials between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery may not approach the table. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise, and individual speaking times will be paused. However, the block of the speaking time and the overall 3-hour time will continue to run. Any written materials provided in response to questions raised during the main estimates should be tabled by the ministry in the assembly for the benefit of all members. Finally, the committee should have an opportunity to hear both questions and answers without interruption during estimate debate. Debate flows through the chair at all times, and you'll find that I'm smiling up here and nodding very much with whatever you're saying to keep the decorum going. So please don't feel, please feel free to look my direction and cast me a glance every once in a while. The other one too is including the instances when speaking time is shared between member and minister. So the other thing too here, folks, this isn't the House, it's a boardroom. It's a committee room, so no heckling. There's none of that. The other thing that really seems to work in these meetings is when we refer to the actual estimates themselves that are under consideration, and also for the folks at home that are following along. So if you can reference page number, table number, the book you're talking about, it sure makes things go a heck of a lot smoother. And honestly, it doesn't waste any time for points of order. It allows the conversations, the questions and answers to flow quicker. So if everyone's comfortable with the rules of engagement, okay, perfect. With that, Minister, we would just be tickled if you would open us up. You get the first 10 minutes of this, and away you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. It is my pleasure to present the 2024-25 main estimates for the Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Trade. I've already introduced those at my table with me here, but behind me in the gallery are Jerry Velica, my Chief of Staff, Josh Aldrich, Press Secretary, Leah Wood, my Ministerial Assistant, Jennifer Jabs, my ADM of International Trade, Liam Stone, ADM of Economic Strategy and Investment, Sylvia Lepke, Assistant Deputy Minister of Economic Development and Business Supports, Miles Morris, Assistant Deputy Minister of Safe, Fair and Healthy Workplaces, Wendy Doyle, Executive Director of Child Care Policy and Continuous Improvement, Dion Kennedy, Executive Director of Prevention, Early Intervention in Youth, Shanna Schulhauser, Director of Communications, and Mike Jenkinson, Director of Executive Operations in the Deputy Minister's Office. So Jobs, Economy and Trade enhances Alberta's competitive advantage and helps create the conditions that contribute to our province's economic prosperity. The Ministry's activities have helped to make Alberta the economic engine of Canada, and in 2024, we are keeping that momentum going. For the upcoming fiscal year, the Ministry will employ about 1,300 staff to undertake these activities. These activities will also be financially supported by $1.85 billion in operating expenses, $14.6 million in capital investment, and $10 million in capital grants. One activity that supports Alberta's economy is promoting trade opportunities. Showcasing Alberta to the world through trade missions enhances the province's access to new and emerging markets, provides opportunities for our exporters, and also creates jobs for Albertans. We will continue to build on the success of recent trade missions to Japan and the Middle East, and look forward to telling Alberta's story in Central America, Europe, and Asia in the coming months. We will also continue to work with the federal government to make sure our province's interests are promoted and protected in international trade agreements. Along with expanding our markets, the Ministry will continue to attract investment and provide support for regional economic development. We will invest $38 million in 24-25 to support these activities, which includes $15 million for the Investment and Growth Fund, a deal-closing program that has encouraged capital investments of approximately $400 million and created 900 permanent and 500 temporary jobs across the province. And in 24-25, we will spend $105 million to support our province's world-class film and television industry through the Film and Television Tax Credit. We will also be improving the program's requirements to make it easier for film and television producers to claim the tax credit. And we will be expanding the program to more types of productions and encouraging producers to film in diverse parts of the province. Like the Investment and Growth Fund, this program has been a great success and is attracting even more film and television productions to Alberta while diversifying our economy. We will also continue to support regional economic development and small businesses through a variety of programs and initiatives. Budget 2024 provides a total of $17 million for these programs, including transitional supports to Regional Economic Development Alliances, or REDAs, and pathfinding, coaching, and training so that small businesses can continue to grow and succeed. When businesses and regions thrive, it creates job opportunities for all Albertans. Part of the work of my ministry is to support workers and their employers. Budget 2024 will invest $129 million for skills and training support programs, workforce development, and labor market information. Through agreements with the federal government, we will continue to assist Albertans who are seeking jobs and help them gain new in-demand skills. These programs also help those who may face employment barriers, such as people with disabilities, women, newcomers, youth, and Indigenous Albertans. and we will continue to attract workers to Alberta in areas of high demand and in occupations facing labor shortages. The Alberta is Calling campaign is one initiative that has helped ease those pressures. And the Alberta is Calling Attraction Bonus, which will be launched next month, will take this a step further by bridging significant labor market gaps that currently exist in the skilled trades. With a budget of $10 million, the Attraction Bonus will provide a one-time $5,000 refundable tax credit to help hardworking out-of-province job seekers take up key positions in Alberta's skilled trades. Once these job seekers have been attracted to Alberta, it is important that they work in safe, fair, and healthy workplaces. Budget 2024 will invest $68 million for education and enforcement of OHS and employment standard laws. I note that OHS programs are offset by funds transferred from the Workers' Compensation Board, which is backed by employer premiums and investment income from the board's accident fund. This means no taxpayer dollars are directly involved. The ministry is hiring 33 additional full-time frontline staff to improve education and enforcement of OHS laws. These additional staff will allow more in-person inspections of work sites, reduce overtime costs, and help retain OHS officers by periodically rotating them off trauma-related work. This is a positive step to having all workers return home safely after each workday. Budget 2024 also supports the ministry's continuing work to clear the backlog of employment standards complaints, effectively enforce the rules, and protect vulnerable workers from being exploited. And we will continue to promote early resolution of complaints between employers and employees. In the unfortunate circumstance where workers are injured or ill and are not being compensated fairly for it, the ministry has allocated $19 million to support the Appeals Commission for Alberta's workers' compensation. The Appeals Commission helps to ensure injured and ill workers and their employers are being treated fairly by the workers' compensation system. As with OHS, the Appeals Commission is funded by transfers from the WCB, which means no taxpayer dollars are directly involved. Finally, the ministry continues to support the fair and equitable application of Alberta's labor relations laws by providing $5 million to fund the Alberta Labor Relations Board. Safe, fair, and healthy workplaces are productive workplaces that contribute to Alberta's continued economic growth. A sustainable and high-quality childcare system allows parents to pursue employment opportunities, achieve financial independence and security, and increases their participation in Alberta's economy. Budget 2024 provides $1.2 billion for childcare affordability and access. It also provides $304 million for childcare quality and supports for early childhood educators, or ECEs. We listened to childcare providers and on March 1st made important changes to how we pay them so that our childcare system can remain sustainable, affordable, and available to hardworking Alberta parents. By providing childcare providers with 80% of their approximate monthly claim at the beginning of each month, in addition to the fees they collect from parents, we are helping to reduce their operating financial pressures. These changes are all part of our government's transformation of the childcare system. Budget 2024 will continue to support this transformation through the province's childcare funding framework. We will continue to work closely with the federal government on the Alberta Canada-wide Early Learning Childcare Agreement and the Affordability Grant Agreement, which has reduced daycare costs to $15 a day as of January 2024, and will further reduce those costs to $10 a day by the end of 2026, ensuring Alberta's parents are even better supported in their efforts to balance work and family life. Budget 2024 is a responsible plan for a growing province. The estimates of jobs, economy, and trade support that plan and help foster the conditions for economic growth now and into the future. I'm happy to take your questions, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Minister, and with 2 minutes extra, that's very kind of you. So now we're off to the first 60-minute block, and it begins the question and answer portion of it. It'll go over to the official opposition. During this period, you can cede your time back and forth amongst each other, and then I'll let you ask the question if the Minister wants shared time or block time, and from there I can advise if, how the speaking times go, but basically within the block, no more than 10 minutes of speaking in a row. So with that, I see Member Ip.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so just a matter of procedure, I guess the first thing to decide is whether it's block time or
Yep,
whether there's
absolutely.
more of a
So
dialogue.
just make that request and away we go.
I guess I'll maybe ask that of the Minister. What would you prefer? What would work best for you?
Block time.
Perfect. Then I'll begin my first block, and I want to thank the Minister Jones as well as all of the ministry officials and staff who are here to answer questions, and thank you for the very important work that you do in this ministry and for facilitating tonight's dialogue. With this in mind, I'd like to start my questions with some larger big picture questions. Specifically, I want to start with outcome number 1 of the business plan, Alberta's economy is prospering. Certainly as the official opposition critic for Jobs, Economy and Trade, and like many in this room, I'm very committed to ensuring that Alberta businesses and enterprises have the support to find talent they need so that they can grow and prosper, and that Albertans have access to sustainable, well-paying jobs and enable families to thrive. And so, Minister, you spoke of the importance of workforce development and workers who face barriers. But as we begin this estimates debate, there are serious issues facing Alberta employers and workers. Specifically on page 26 of the government's fiscal plan, projects that Alberta's real GDP per capita will stagnate, or has begun to stagnate, between the years of 2022 and 2027. This, of course, is particularly concerning as Alberta is, we all want it to be the land of opportunity, and yet, according to the government's own words, quote, real GDP per capita is falling behind. So my first question to the Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade is, what is your plan to address the falling GDP per capita, the stagnating GDP per capita, and if there is a plan to specifically address this issue, is it reflected under workforce strategies line item or any other line item of the current government estimates? And how do you expect the real GDP discrepancy as described in your documents to improve as we head into 2023? And Mr. Chair, staying with outcome 1 of the business plan, another large, big picture item that I want to address pertains to automation and the changing landscape of jobs in Alberta. As we know, there are fewer jobs in the oil and gas sector today than there was even in 2019. Due to a number of different factors, there is a shift certainly in the landscape of our workforce, but much of it is due to automation, and this trend is going to accelerate for years to come. Reported by both Ernst & Young as well as by McKinsey, workforce and the nature of work is changing, and by 2030, globally, millions of jobs will be lost to automation. So the decisions that Alberta makes now in getting ahead of these trends will certainly affect Albertans for decades to come. So speaking to this, I would like to know what the government's plan is to navigate Alberta's economy as these workforce changes come into play, like automation, and as it impacts some of perhaps our traditional industry. And again, are some of these strategies, if they exist or if there is a plan, are they currently reflected within the government estimates, as in, is it currently being funded? I also want to draw our attention to Objective 2.1 from the Alberta Business Plan, which talks about implementing initiatives to address Alberta's current and longer-term labor market challenges, which the minister also referenced in his remarks. And specifically within this, I'd like to draw your attention to the Alberta is Calling Attraction Bonus, the $5,000 refundable tax credit for skilled trades that move into Alberta from other provinces in 2024. And of course, this program is intended to be an incentive to attract much needed talent to Alberta and fill labor shortages in the skilled trades. But even so, there are a number of different discrepancies and I would say about-face changes from what was previously promised by this government and what is now being delivered. Positively, when this program was first announced, it was going to be a $1,200 tax credit. It is now a $5,000 tax credit. Certainly on this side, we see that as positive. However, previously, healthcare and childcare workers were included as part of the tax credit. Currently, it excludes healthcare and childcare workers. We know that this province continues to face a shortage of both healthcare and childcare workers. And so my question to the government is actually quite simple. Why did the government make this change, and what actually spurred this change between last May, the last election, and until now? Next, I'd like to focus on perhaps more of the specific details of the Alberta is Calling attraction bonus. I understand that details are still to be released, but I'd like to learn, and I'm sure members of the public would also be interested in learning about what the government estimates that in terms of the number of folks who will qualify for this tax credit, and how does it compare to the number of skilled trades workers that we need? So in other words, how many people would actually qualify for this tax credit under the current eligibility requirements that's being proposed, and what is the actual need that is projected by government? Obviously, I'm wondering if those two numbers align. If you have that information, that would be certainly very helpful. I'm aware that the minister has publicly stated that the number of workers that Alberta needs range between 20 and 30,000, and so I'm interested in knowing if ministry staff or the minister can provide this information. How many of these positions that we actually need in Alberta, in which there's a shortage, is specifically in the skilled trades? My understanding is that this program currently has a general benchmark of attracting about 2,000 skilled trades workers, but anecdotally, I think when you speak to stakeholders, Alberta needs much more than 2,000 skilled trades workers. And so I'm concerned that currently what is being budgeted within this program is simply not enough to move the needle to fill, in terms of filling the shortages that we're seeing all across the province. Assuming that there is a bit of a discrepancy between what is needed, the number of workers needed in the skilled trades, and what this program funds, I'm hoping that the minister can provide an explanation as to why specifically the benchmark is 2,000 right now. I also like to dive into the tax credit specifically and understand which professions would actually qualify for this tax credit. And so when we're speaking about skilled trades, that's a broad category. Does it simply mean that it's only folks that would earn a red seal or journeyman, or is it a broader umbrella term that describes other professions as well? And as I continue on this line of questioning, I'd like to learn more about the budget for this program. My understanding is that $14 million is set aside. So just doing very rough math, if you multiply the $5,000 tax credit by about 2,000 workers, which is my understanding is sort of the benchmark, it's about $10 million. And so what isn't clear in the budget documents is what $4 million might be spent on if it's not on the tax credit itself. So if the minister can please enumerate and detail that spending, that certainly would be helpful. And specifically, I'd like to learn how much of that approximate $4 million will be spent on in-house administration, and if you're able to provide any breakdowns. When it comes to outreach and the implementation of the program, I'd like to understand how you might actually be targeting or specifically reaching the desired.
And it's surprising how quick that 10 minutes goes. Yeah. But MLA Ip, well done for setting the tone and the pace for this, of referencing the documents and keeping the tone there. Well done. Minister, over to you.
Wasn't quick for me, Chair. He asked many, many good questions. So I'll try to go through them, and if I miss anything, please catch me on another question. What do I think of when I think of Alberta as prospering? I think about people wanting to live and work here and build a business. Certainly, at times, Alberta has not seen that. Prior to me entering politics, and one of the reasons I entered, we saw about 183,000 people lose their jobs and a flight of tens of billions in capital. From 2015 to 2019, and it resulted in record business closures. And you fast forward to today, and we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing record numbers of people choose Alberta, 200,000 over a 12-month period last year. You're seeing the fastest job growth in the country, the highest wages in the country, the lowest taxes in the country, and the least red tape. So I think when I think of Alberta as prospering, I think of a government that creates the conditions for Albertans and Alberta businesses to prosper. And those are key things like low taxes. So we've reduced the corporate tax rate, we've kept personal taxes low, and we've kept things like a sales tax or health premiums off. I think of a government that champions business and energy. Certainly our government has done that, including at times when perhaps traditional energy, which is now very popular everywhere I go in the world, everybody wants Alberta's oil and gas. At times, it was not so popular to champion our world-class oil and gas sector. I think of a government that gets out of the way of people in business, and that comes back to our obsession with reducing regulatory burden. So I think by most metrics, Alberta is outperforming Canada and is certainly far exceeding its weight in Confederation. And I'm not concerned by temporary small declines in GDP, because I'm optimistic that Alberta will continue to outperform our Canadian and North American counterparts. We are investing to make sure that we do that. We're going to train workers. We're going to invest in capital to become more productive. We're going to open up additional trade with places like Japan, where we were recently on a trade mission there. You talked about automation and effects on the oil and gas sector. This is a very real challenge, but also a significant opportunity. So I look at the oil and gas sector, and in some ways it is amazing that we can achieve record production with less inputs. But at the same time, there's also an opportunity to take workers with significant experience in our world-class energy sector and say, where else can they add value? And where the world is excited about Alberta is things like hydrogen and geothermal, CCUS. And it turns out that the same skills that were relevant in oil and gas production and extraction are very relevant in these other emerging and very key sectors. So we're looking at how we can support our post-secondaries and our companies in bridging that gap, so that as less people do work in the oil and gas sector, we can get them working in other key sectors, including hydrogen and CCUS, which comes back to the broader plan of continuing to diversify the economy. So we love our oil and gas sector just like we love our ag sector, but it is prudent for our government to diversify, and that's why you see us make significant investments in things like tech and innovation and film and television. Address current longer-term labor challenges. Yeah, so this is a cross-ministerial challenge to solve, and we're working with partners outside of government as well. So we've pulled together advanced education, immigration and multiculturalism, my ministry, and others to look at the areas where Alberta has key labor issues to solve. And I'll use the skilled trades as it's the most obvious example for this ministry, although the same would apply in health and childcare. We look at the entire training funnel or training ecosystem, and we have to start making changes in every aspect of it to address the needs of today and get ahead of the needs of tomorrow. So you look at skilled trades, that means we've got to start young. in our K-12 system. We have to esteem the trades. We have to educate youth of the significant job opportunities that a career in skilled trades offers. And we have to give them tangible real-life experience. So that's what we're looking at doing. We're looking at ensuring that everybody who attends K-12 in Alberta exits having had the opportunity to hands-on try something related to trades, and that they have an awareness that there is a valued and valuable career available to them in the skilled trades. And then you move on to the post-secondary. You've seen our government is adding seats like crazy. We're training as many skilled trades as we can because, and this came into one of your questions later, as of Q3 last year, we had about 19,700 vacancies in the skilled trades. It's about 22% of our 80-ish thousand vacancies. So it's a key area for us to solve. We're also looking at greater partnerships with unions and industry to train workers directly. So this is not a problem that post-secondaries can solve on their own. There's very sophisticated unions, very sophisticated companies that have access to the equipment and the sites that could be used to help address the skilled labor gap. Which is a good segue into why Alberta's calling is still necessary. First, this is a laser-focused campaign to target skilled trades workers across Canada. And the reason for that is simple. We cannot produce the ones we need today. It takes years to produce them. And yet we have homes, schools, hospitals, and billions of dollars of investment that we have successfully competed for and won that we need to deliver on if we are to win additional investment. So it is a $5,000 non-refundable tax credit. I'm glad that you agree that that is a much more appropriate number than $1,200. $1,200 taxable to me was not material, and that was what we found when we consulted with industry. They said the same thing. As to why this current phase does not include healthcare or childcare workers, this is phase one, and we will evaluate this program to determine if it can be leveraged to address other shortages. We have ongoing work within within our ECE for childcare. We have professional development. We are promoting the career, and health has, I have a page. I would encourage you to ask them in their estimates, but they have about a page of different ways that they recruit and retain workers. I'll use the Philippines MOU as an example. They have a bridging program where they take nurses from the Philippines and give them financial assistance and training to quickly get them on the ground working in Alberta. They have incentives for rural physicians. So the Alberta's Calling Attraction Bonus is targeting skilled trades, but it doesn't mean that we're not already as a government making significant efforts to recruit and retain healthcare workers and childcare workers. And on childcare, I'll note that our capacity to train them is up 33% as compared to 3 years ago. We have 47% more ECEs than we had 3 years ago. That's about 8,500 more, and they're more educated than they used to be. In other words, we have a higher proportion of level 2s and level 3s. It is obviously a commitment of mine to continue to produce and retain ECEs because we need them for our ambitious childcare space creation goals. It's roughly 10,000 additional licensed spaces that we need to create each year for the next 3 years. You asked about the budget. Very simple, $10 million for the $5,000 grants for 2,000 recipients, and then you have a few $1 million for advertising across Canada, and that's TV, radio, billboards, social media, and then you have some for administration. And of course, as with every program, we're going to look to get as much of that in the way of refundable tax credits and advertising, and try to be as lean as we can on the administration side. So hopefully that addresses most of your questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Minister. And back to the official opposition.
Thank you,
ahead,
Chair. So I'll begin by my 10-minute period of time by focusing on outcome 3, as noted in the Ministry Business Plan document, page 94, where it states Albertans are safe at work and treated fairly in the workplace. And certainly this major block of my questions and comments are going to revolve around those issues of occupational health and safety, Chair. My questions will also reference 3.1 and 3.2 of the key objectives, which have to do with working with stakeholders and others to implement changes to that OHS code, and indeed to support a coordinated approach through education, prevention, inspections, and investigations on page 94 of the business plan. And of course, I hope it goes without saying that making sure that every worker who goes to their job and making sure that they return home safely is one of the most important priorities of this ministry. And of course, that also means that the work that OHS teams do are extraordinarily important. And according to the 2022-23 Jobs Economy and Northern Development Annual Report, it noted in that report that close to 8,000 regulatory requirements were removed from the OHS code. Some new requirements were added in 8 parts of the code. And it also talked about the fact that generally, and I think the minister alluded to it earlier, that the ministry has reduced regulatory requirements by about 41%. In this year's ministry plan, it also references in 3.1, and 3.2 the key objectives, that ability to work with stakeholders, employers, and workers to then implement all of those changes that have happened in OHS safety codes in order to protect the health and welfare of Alberta workers. And certainly, in my view, regulatory requirements are meant to be and should be prescriptive. It's about keeping that idea of the precautionary principle in mind, Chair. And that's because these sorts of requirements do indeed save lives, prevent injuries, prevent illnesses in workers. And when it's an issue of worker safety, it shouldn't be about the bare minimum or lowering the bar. So, Chair, through you and to the Minister, in that business plan where it discusses how legislative changes and service enhancement reduce costs of employment for employers, one of my questions then is to ask about the potential implications that folks might be seeing right now of those reductions that have happened over the last number of years. What are some implications and ramifications that folks in the ministry are now seeing in terms of how that lack of almost 8,000 regulations may indeed have affected the safety and welfare of workers in Alberta? I'm wondering too whether or not there's been discussion at the ministry level, if there's been recent discussions with stakeholders, if so, who those stakeholders might have been. For instance, have they been employees, employers, folks perhaps representing the WCB end of things? And I know I've said this often, because I'm a teacher, I'm looking for that ongoing feedback loop. Are people looping back to do a bit of a double check to see how folks might either continue to be or not continue to be impacted by those changes and updates? And then, Chair, through you and to the Minister, page 94 of the Ministry's business plan talks about performance metrics, specifically Section 3A, performance indicator, and it notes that Alberta is committed to reducing occupational injury rates by implementing effective prevention programs and labor legislation. And yet, on page 95 of the business plan, we see that over the last 3 years, lost time claim rates as well as disabling injury rates have both increased over 12%, even when COVID-related injuries and illnesses are eliminated, both rates have still increased. So it's important to remember that even as we consider the numbers, we're dealing with people, their lives, and their livelihoods. So I'm hoping that the Minister can speak to the reality of those increases over the years, potential reasons for those concerning trends, as well as any plans that might be in place to reverse those trends. Sticking with page 94, the Ministry Business Plan, Performance Metrics, Section 3A, and looking as well at the 2022-23 Annual Report, page 59, where it talks about different OHS field activities and how those field activities might indeed relate to lost time claim rates. I note that in 2019-20, there were 24,456 field activities with a resulting 1.56 lost time claim rate. And if you look at 22-23, we're down to 21,950 OHS field activities, a lost time claim rate of 1.95. And then again, the fact that the number of investigations has decreased substantially, the number of presentations given and meetings have decreased, yet re-inspections have increased, continuations of investigations have increased, number of publications delivered is increasing, and overall inspections indeed have decreased as well. So when I sort of put all of that information together, and we know, of course, that the lower the rate of lost time claims and the lower the rate of disabling injury, the better, of course, for workers and the folks that they work for. So I'm hoping the minister can explain again what trends or unaddressed risk factors might be at play. I'm wondering if thought's been given to looking into things further beyond the OHS review, which of course has a different purpose. And I'm wondering, again, bringing it back to my original question, if the changes to regulations made have really had a negative impact, and could this be the area in which we're actually seeing that negative impact? And further, how do we know one way or the other? What metrics and measures are in play? Which ones are being considered? What assessments are brought to bear when analyzing any results that might be found? Is there a sense or a trend, perhaps, that infractions might be becoming not only more plentiful, but as well, perhaps, a bit more serious? And so then my next block of questions delves, I suppose, a little bit deeper into how the system itself is functioning on behalf of workers. That's objective 3.1 and 3.2. And I note that the ministry uses an evidence-based and research-based approach in order to identify emerging trends and areas where it deems proactive action would be beneficial. That seems quite reasonable to me. And in the business plan on page 91, it also notes that research indeed helps to identify emerging trends and where that proactive action would be beneficial. So I'm wondering, Chair, through you and to the Minister, if the Minister could then clarify and explain the differences between reactive and proactive inspections and why it appears the incidence of proactive inspections is so much less than those that are reactive. Further, could the Minister clarify what research is being used to identify those emerging trends and inform current OHS practices? What research might be ongoing, for instance, with any of our post-secondary institutions? And again, are there ongoing surveys, interviews, roundtables, councils, committees doing work on this really important matter? Is there perhaps cross-ministry or cross-jurisdictional work that's being done at either the federal or even interprovincial level? And then to clarify and explain how that research might translate into an evidence-based approach. Further, I note, Chair, on page 91 of the business plan, it states targeted attraction and retention strategies, including Alberta is Calling, promoted Alberta as Canada's destination of choice for skilled talent. And yet, according to the Workplace Injury, Illness and Fatality Stats Provincial Summary 2022, we know that, and this does exclude COVID-related data, that sectors like nurses, aides, orderlies, and patient service associates have recently become the leading occupation with the highest proportion of claims, and that's on page 10 of that summary. We also know that just generally folks who happen to be working in healthcare, including paramedics and nurses, are increasingly concerned about their exposure to traumatic incidents. And we know that the sector I most recently worked in, the education sector, which of course includes educational assistance, has recently risen to become as well one of those sectors with rates higher than the provincial average and one of the highest rates of claim. And certainly I'd venture to guess, with my own experience as a teacher and working with many EAs, I would imagine that those claim rates that we are seeing probably don't reflect the reality of what's actually happening in our schools. So the question I have then, or questions I have, is I'm wondering if the Minister, again, could explain in detail what cross-ministry work has been done, particularly with health education and advanced education, to assist these workers as they deal with injuries on the job, as they deal with illnesses on the job, as they deal with those sorts of dangers that they work with every single day. And I know that the Minister referred to some additional staff, and I'm wondering if some of those staff might be working on some of these initiatives. And I'm also wondering, finally, Chair, what are the assurances that the Ministry can give these workers that the environment that they are working in every day will be safe over the long term? Because this, of course, not only has to do with the future but current workers too, knowing that one fatality is one fatality too many, one injury is one injury too many. And my concern is that we haven't really established the conditions for retention and recruitment, despite the fact that's what these programs are all about.
With 2 seconds to spare. Well done, so great questions. I shouldn't say that, but as the chair, it piqued my interest given my former background, and I'm looking forward to hearing the responses as much as the folks are at home.
Thank you. So through the Safe, Fair, and Healthy Workplaces Division, my department focuses on ensuring that Albertans are treated fairly at work and can obviously return home safely at the end of their shifts. The department uses a balanced approach to support this work, which includes education, outreach, and partnerships, along with compliance and enforcement activities. The overall budget for Safe, Fair, and Healthy Workplaces is $68 million, which includes funding for the division as well as policy support. The work of Safe, Fair, and Healthy Workplaces Division directly supports Outcome 3 in the 2024-27 business plan, that Albertans are safe at work and treated fairly in the workplace. So starting with Occupational Health and Safety, or OHS, Alberta's regulatory framework is based on what is known as the Internal Responsibility System. This means that worksite parties, including employers, supervisors, workers, owners, and contractors, have the primary responsibility for health and safety. My department supports worksite parties in fulfilling their obligations through information and resources and through regulatory oversight by monitoring for compliance with legislative requirements. Safe, healthy workplaces start with prevention. Through the Prevention Initiative for Alberta's OHS system, my department brings together employers, workers, government, the Workers' Compensation Board, and health and safety professionals on a regular basis to keep workplaces and workers safe through awareness and action. The Prevention Initiative uses an evidence-based approach to focus on reducing common workplace injuries, protecting at-risk workers, like those mentioned, and identifying higher-risk work situations. In addition, my department supports worksite parties through the comprehensive information resources to help them meet their obligations for health and safety. Through the online OHS resource portal, over 400 resources are made available, including information bulletins on OHS requirements, effective practices guidelines, toolkits and templates for implementing strong OHS practices, and webinars on important OHS topics. In addition, core or foundational resources are translated into 7 languages to reflect the changing nature of Alberta's workforce. Our work in preventing injury and illness also recognizes the heightened risk of mental health injuries in first responder occupations. To help address this issue, the Supporting Psychological Health in First Responders Grant, or SPHIFER, provides $1.5 million annually to support applied research and the development of services for first responders who are living with or at risk for post-traumatic stress injuries. Finally, our prevention work recognizes that safety is not an accident and that injuries and illnesses can be prevented through effective health and safety management systems. Alberta's Certificate of Recognition Program, or CORE, is a partnership between industry, the department, and the Workers' Compensation Board. Under the program, employers can register and receive training from one of 10 certifying partners to implement or improve their health and safety management systems. Upon passing an audit of their system, the employer receives a certificate of recognition. There are currently about 10,000 certificates of recognition held by Alberta employers, covering almost 40% of Alberta workforces, reporting to the Workers' Compensation Board. Certificate of recognition holders outperform employers without a certification by 27% when comparing aggregate loss ratios. In addition to improvements in safety performance, a certificate of recognition reduces an employer's Workers' Compensation Board costs. In 2022, CORE holders received $78.7 million in direct refunds from the Workers' Compensation Board. So moving on to our OHS regulatory role, Jobs, Economy, and Trade has 216 staff focused on monitoring for compliance with legislative requirements, and 151 of those are frontline staff. With the increase of $5 million in OHS funding in this year's budget, those numbers will increase to 249 and 187 respectively. So we're increasing resources. These additional positions follow an internal examination of our service delivery approach and support an enhanced model that focuses on areas of high risk where our interventions can have the greatest impact. Our OHS officers conduct inspections of work sites in Alberta every day. These inspections are done proactively based on evidence around higher risk industries and occupations, as well as in response to complaints. The goal of these inspections is to determine whether the worksite parties are meeting their legal requirements, and officers use a range of tools to achieve compliance. It starts with education, as some contraventions can easily be corrected on-site by clarifying requirements, and further compliance action is not necessary. Officers also issue compliance orders for corrective action if a contravention cannot be corrected immediately. In situations where a work activity or equipment presents an immediate danger, officers will issue stop work and stop use orders to address the hazard. And finally, our officers can issue tickets and administrative penalties for certain violations of legislation. With respect to our proactive and focused inspections, I mentioned earlier that we take an evidence-based approach to ensure our inspection activities are aimed at areas of high risk and where our interventions can make the most impact. We utilize WCB claim information along with our own compliance and enforcement data to determine priorities for proactive inspections. In addition, we conduct focused inspections in some areas based on emerging trends that we are seeing in the field. Some of the areas where we have proactive and focused inspection programs underway include manufacturing, wholesaling, warehousing, and department stores, continuing care, oil and gas, and residential construction. Some of the key facts or data from our inspections for the first 3 quarters of 23-24 are as follows. Officers completed 13,500 inspections and issued 11,000 orders. 8 violation tickets and 16 administrative penalties were issued. The other components of our compliance and enforcement work is investigating serious incidents. This includes incidents that result in fatalities or hospitalization, along with other serious non-injury incidents such as unplanned or uncontrolled explosions, fires or floods, structural collapses or failures, or the collapse or upset of a crane, derrick, or hoist. The goal of our officers' work in conducting these investigations is to determine the cause of the incident and to identify whether there has been a violation of legislation. Upon completion of an investigation, the file is reviewed for potential enforcement action, which can include orders, administrative penalties, or referral to Crown prosecutors for consideration of charges. In the first 3 quarters of 23-24, 484 investigations were initiated for reportable serious incidents, and charges were laid in 15 cases against worksite parties for violations of our legislation. To support the work of our officers conducting investigations, we have investigation specialists who connect with the next of kin of deceased workers to make referrals to the appropriate supports and keep them up to date on the file. These specialists also liaise with the Crown prosecutors on files that result in charges. Once an investigation, including any court proceeding, is concluded, we publish our fatality investigation reports. This provides opportunities for all to learn from the incident and to take steps to prevent similar incidents in the future. Turning now to employment standards, Jobs, Economy and Trade is responsible for administering and enforcing Alberta's employment legislation. This includes areas such as paying earnings, overtime, vacations, and terminations of employment. And there are 118 people who work in the Employment Standards branch. Like OHS, Employment Standards also uses both education and compliance approaches so workers know their rights. And I wanted to touch on the lost time claim rate, which measures lost time injury and disease. It's a claim for an occupational injury or disease that causes a worker to have any time away from work beyond the day of the injury. And it represents the number of lost time claims per 100 person years worked, and the probability or risk of lost time injury or disease to a worker during a period of 1 year's work. The measure reports both reactive and proactive OHS field activities, including inspections, re-inspections, investigations, and presentations. So in 22-23, OHS field activities did decrease about 17% over the prior year. The decrease was primarily due to higher than usual field activities conducted in 21-22 to support the province's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and to support workers in implementing pandemic management protocols. The number of activities in 22-23 was roughly equal to the number in 2018-2019 pre-pandemic, which makes sense after dropping from the highest point in 2020-21. OHS field activities include inspections, re-inspections, investigations. So there are various external factors that affect the number of OHS inspections, such as economic activity and workplace trends resulting in targeted inspection programs. Factors that are within the control of the ministry include providing educational materials which help employers and workers understand their responsibilities, conducting proactive inspection programs, working with employers who have high rates of injury and disease, and promoting the workplace health and safety management system through the Certificate of Recognition program I referenced earlier. The disabling rate injury did increase to 3.01 in 2022 from 2.88 in 2021 and was the highest in the last 5 years. However, without COVID-19 claims, the disabling injury rates were 2.32 for 2020, 2.5 for 2021, and 2.5 for 2022. This demonstrates another example of
And thank you, Minister. Being completely unbiased, your answers didn't disappoint the chair. Hopefully they didn't disappoint the opposition. Over to the opposition members for your next portion.
Perfect, thank you. So through the chair, can I ask the minister if you'd consider shared time for this next block?
block time.
Block time, okay. All right, so childcare. So the Canada-Alberta, Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Agreement is where I want to start. So through the chair, looking at the business plan, page 95, the initiative supporting key objectives, the second point. So in 2024-25, the ministry will allocate $1.4 billion in affordability grants and parent subsidies to support an average of $15 per day for families with children enrolled in licensed childcare programs. Can the ministry, through the chair, confirm that of the $1.4 billion, that only $331 million is federal funds, with the rest, the $1.13 billion, coming from the federal government? Page 64 of the fiscal plan, 24 to 25, indicates a carrying forward of $73 million of unspent funding from 22 to 23. Through the chair, does the minister expect another carry forward for this current fiscal year? Through the chair again, were there funds unspent on childcare in the 21-22 fiscal year? If so, how much? And were these funds returned to the federal government or carried forward? Through the chair, what is the total of unused federal funds the ministry has not spent in the allocated time? Can the ministry explain the reasoning behind the delay of spending, especially given the needs of the providers, parents, and educators? In 2019, the province provided $424 million to childcare and has decreased their contribution year over year. As mentioned, this fiscal year, the government has allotted $331 million of provincial funds. Does the ministry expect the need for childcare spaces to decrease? Does the ministry expect that the population boom that Alberta is having doesn't include children now or in the future? Can the minister please explain why the province is not investing in childcare? Again, through the chair, is the program on course for the $10 a day on average by 2026? I noticed the goal for last budget and this current one are both at $15 a day. I understand that we did hit that at the end of 2023, but I am curious through the chair to the minister, where we're currently at and whether we're on track for $10 a day childcare in 2026. And can the minister, through the chair, share what areas have the most expensive childcare and what areas are lowest to support an average? And when I refer to where, I mean physically inside the province. Through the chair, are there operators that are not participating in the grant program? And how much do the lowest income earners pay each day? A question again through the chair, what does average mean in the context of $10 a day care in the Alberta Agreement? Is it regional, is it the whole province, etc.? Through the chair, can the minister share what the province has planned for the 2026 when this agreement with the federal government is scheduled to expire? Is the provincial government prepared to take on the bulk of the funding? Should Albertan families prepare to have their $10 a day childcare discontinued? Or is the provincial government planning to support and fund the system that is childcare? If the latter, when can Albertan families expect the continuation of the $10 a day childcare, and or will they be consulted as the plan moves forward? So I'll now move on, Mr. Chair, to quality and safety. So page 148 of estimates, budget line 5.1, childcare affordability and access. So this specifically speaks to providing funding for licensed childcare programs to lower the childcare fees and improve access to quality, inclusive childcare, and also oversees licensing and inspections. So quality, so through the chair, can the ministry provide a definition of quality? In the context of childhood, childcare, because I'm looking at the business plan 24 to 27, page 95, outcome number 4, repeats similar phrasing, a claim where you have significant investments in high quality inclusive childcare, and key objective 4.2 uses enhanced quality. So again, the definition is really important for us to understand the objectives of the government with this budget. I would also love, through the chair, for the ministry to comment on where they're at for core versus enhanced services for this childcare agreement. My understanding is that the $10 a day will cover core, whereas the enhanced will have additional costs. So my first question, through the chair to the minister, is how are these categories being determined? What experts have been consulted? Have parents and early child educators been consulted themselves? What evidence-based resource are they using to guide these decisions? Will the public have a chance to provide their input on the final list? Through the chair to the ministry, how is this ministry avoiding creating a two-tier childcare system? Will there be regulations around whether you can offer both the core and enhanced the same center or within the same cohort, classroom, et cetera? And where might I find the resources to fund these actions inside the budget? Next, I'd like to talk about the flight curriculum framework. So it's an evidence-based framework that maximizes learning and development. Through the chair, can the minister share the number of educators that were trained on flight in 23 and 24? How many educators does this budget aim to train? How does this compare to previous years? The annual report, page 19, indicates a new intermediate level of training that was rolled out in 2022. Through the chair, can the minister share if these trainings are going to continue, whether there are plans for an expert level training, and again, which budget line do these funds come from? So there's been a lot of conversations in other estimates regarding the ever-increasing complexity of children and their families. So where the needs are quite different than a decade ago, where behavioral and communication concerns have huge impact on the supports necessary to keep these children and families safe. So with that in mind, through the chair, can the minister provide examples of actions, strategies, and policies that will or are being introduced to keep our children and the workers safe? And going again, safety, I would love to clarify through the chair to the minister what changes they've made to their licensing and inspecting practices given the E. coli outbreak in fall 2023 in Calgary, where at least 448 people fell ill, mostly children, 1 adult, and 39 children were hospitalized, some with life-changing consequences. And more recently, centers have been found having live mice and cockroaches. I realize, of course, the government works with municipalities and health authorities, but clarity on what actions the provincial government is doing would be great, and what proportion of the $1.17 billion that is allocated for action to assure this never happens again. I would also, through the chair to the ministry, would like to know how many stop orders have been issued in this last fiscal year to unlicensed childcare, why they were issued, what tangible actions have the ministry made to prevent the same happening again, how many previously unlicensed stay homes are now licensed from the $500 incentives, and will this continue in 24 and 25? And where can I find those funds in the budget? Moving on. So, performance metrics. So, there is only one for childcare, and it reads as follows. For A, performance measurement, percentage change in the number of licensed childcare spaces. This includes child daycare, family day home, out of school, preschool, innovative and group family childcare programs. Childcare programs operate safely while leveraging federal investments for a focused space creation. So the target itself does not reflect how childcare is being managed by the government. Available spaces do not speak to staff retention or the quality of the curriculum or the care being provided. Further, our target for this one metric for 22-23 was 8%. However, the actual percentage gain was only 7%, so we were not successful. The eventual goal is to provide 1 space per 3 children across the province, so 33%. Page 95 of the business plan, 24 to 27, initiative supporting key objectives. First point, we see that $40.7 million is allocated to support the expansion of childcare spaces. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Chair to Minister, but in 23-24, the government allocated $59.3 million. So this year, this is actually a cut by $18.6 million. After a year that we didn't actually hit our target, knowing there's a huge demand, knowing that childcare is a key economic driver, and we only looked at this one metric, I would love to hear through the chair, I would love the minister through the chair to explain why the rationale behind cutting the 18.6 million. Previous business plans have provided the number of spaces available and then on the enrollment and number of children that receive the subsidies. I'm not sure why this has been removed. If we could ask the ministry, please. Since the business plan no longer is publishing these number of spaces, where is the information being published so that the public receives transparency on these goals? Last year, the metric for 24 to 25 was set at 10%. Now it's been reduced to 9, despite failing to meet our targets the preceding years. So through the chair, can the minister explain this change in goals of childcare spaces? What is the target now? Where are these spaces anticipated to be created? Is there any money anticipated to be directed towards childcare that is due to the Charter Hub in Calgary? Where are the plans to support parents, and where is childcare required the most? And then I'm just going to say thank you for this.
And from the chair to the minister, this is your turn, sir, to respond.
Okay, there's a lot of questions in there. I'll try to address a number of them through some remarks, and then I will go through the ones that I do not address. So obviously, affordable childcare has become a critical part of Alberta's success. As access to affordable childcare increases, so do the opportunities for parents and guardians to enter the workforce, driving forward economic growth and employment. Through the Canada-Alberta Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Agreement, an additional $3.8 billion is being invested over 5 years to help reduce childcare fees for parents, while supporting the creation of up to 68,700 new, high-quality, affordable, and inclusive childcare spaces. I'll pause there. $3.8 billion, that is from the federal government over 5 years. It's being matched by about $1.7 billion in provincial funding. This does not include our investments in ECS through education. And I'll note that we also fund out-of-school care for children that are not covered under the federal agreement as well. So we are significantly investing in childcare. Childcare fees paid by parents were reduced by an average of 50% across the province in January of 2022, only a few months after signing the agreement, and were further reduced to an average of $15 per day in January of 2024. And I'll note there that the timing of the signing of the agreement is very important for many of your other questions. Alberta signed the agreement late in 2021 in November, and then obviously started the hard work of implementing what is a very large agreement and a fundamental change to the way that childcare operates in Alberta. So, you know, our fiscal year, it ends March. So Alberta effectively only had 1 quarter to implement the first year of the agreement, which is why Alberta, since the very beginning of this agreement, has been unable to spend all of the annual allotted funds from the federal government, and why we've required carryovers. The agreement allows for 10%. Every year we've gone and said, hey, we signed this late, we need larger carry forwards, and the federal government has said every year, we get it. We were there too, and they have approved that carry forward. So this year I'm expecting a carry forward. I'm going to call it, I'm going to say around 350 million, Tanis? 250, my apologies, 250 million. But to your other question, we do expect that to be the final carry forward that is in excess of the 10%, because we do expect to fully utilize those funds to ensure affordability for parents. So I had mentioned fees were brought on average to $15 per day in January 2024. You asked how that's calculated. We take the simple average of childcare fees that are charged to parents after incorporating the affordability grant that we provide to operators and the subsidy, which is also provided to operators, but really based on the parents' incomes. And we come up with the simple average, which hit $15 per day in January of 2024. You asked if we were on track. By 2026, parent fees are targeted to be an average of $10 per day, keeping even more money in the pockets of Alberta families. To support an average of $15 per day, Alberta will allocate approximately $1.2 billion in affordability and access initiatives. This investment will ensure quality childcare continues to be affordable for Alberta families, because affordable childcare has always been about Alberta families, and we've heard from parents about how important and life-changing these savings have been for them. We've also added over 22,000 net new spaces, supporting thousands of Albertans to participate in the economy, go back to work, or undertake training opportunities. Our Space Creation Grant Program continues to generate tremendous interest since the program was open to both nonprofit and private operators. We have seen an overwhelming response from operators interested in creating new spaces under the future system and forecast the growth over the next year to be significant. You asked about space creation. Broadly, we are looking to create 68,000 spaces over the 5-year agreement. We've already created 22,000. We have approximately 3 years to go, so we want to create a little over 10,000 spaces per year with the bulk or an increasing amount as we approach the final year of the agreement in 25-26. This is why we'll invest up to $40.7 million in 24-25 to support the expansion of licensed childcare spaces in areas where they are needed most. At the same time, we know that we couldn't achieve our targets without the support and collaboration of childcare operators and educators across the province. The sustainability and long-term success of the childcare system in Alberta is a priority. With Alberta's unique mixed market childcare system, we worked hard to include private childcare operators in the CAELCC agreement, so parents would continue to have choice when selecting the childcare that works best for their family. I also want to acknowledge the hard work and dedication of the thousands of early childhood educators, or ECEs, that really are the backbone of the early learning childcare system in Alberta. Since signing the agreement, we have added over 8,500 ECEs to the workforce, and we've seen the number of ECEs leveling up their credentials by 34%, which ultimately supports our space creation efforts and quality across the province. You'd asked about how many were trained in flight. 902, I believe that was the last year, Tanis? In 902 in the last year, and certainly we see flight reflected in many of our childcare operations. As fees have been reduced to an average of $15 per day for parents, government has increased funding through the affordability grants to childcare operators to replace the revenue they would have otherwise received from parents, as well as to provide additional funding to reflect the increased cost on operators. They have financial reporting requirements under the agreement that they did not have prior to the agreement. With this shift, childcare operators are receiving an increasing portion of the revenue later in the month. We knew this was putting pressure on childcare operators, and which is why we expedited monthly funding for childcare operators to ensure that the childcare system is sustainable. Starting March 1st, we issued a claim advance which provided childcare operators approximately 80% of their monthly claim at the beginning of the month, in addition to the fees they collect from parents. By providing the majority of funding up front, we will help to reduce the financial pressures on childcare operators, allowing them to focus on what they do, which is providing high-quality care. I do want to note that the current affordability grant structure will eventually be replaced by a new funding formula, which you touched on in your questions, under the cost control framework, that will determine how and when funding is allocated to childcare operators over the long term. Our government recently held engagement sessions across the province to get childcare operators' input on development of the new funding formula, so that it will continue to meet the needs of childcare operators and parents while ensuring high-quality childcare is an option for Alberta families. And I think I'll touch on here, your line of questioning was good in that it highlighted many of the challenges and opportunities when taking a system that has 2,600 operators and transitioning them to what is really a universal system. And we obviously want to be equitable to our operators. We want to ensure that they have viable operations, which means we have to do a regional analysis to determine what is the cost of reasonable delivery of high-quality childcare, whether it be in Fort McMurray or Southeast Calgary or Lac St. Anne Parkland, or as God Country, as the chair would call it. Because in reality, those costs would be different. And to do that work, we first have to define the service, which is the other work that we're doing right now. What is $10 a day childcare? What does it include and what does it not? This is not in any way, shape, or form trying to reduce the quality of childcare. Quite the opposite. We are setting the bar very high, and every operator across the province will be expected to deliver high quality childcare at that standard. And then we're going to do the analysis I touched on earlier to determine what a reasonable cost would be to provide that based on their type of operation, the age of the child, where they are in the province. And that will feed into what their affordability grant or whatever the final subsidy piece ends up being, because I don't like all the current pieces. There's just too many of them. It's a little confusing and administratively difficult on both sides. So hopefully that answers your question on that. Core and enhanced, very simply, core is going to be high-quality childcare as defined with the assistance of our operators and our parents. Enhanced is going to be anything that's not included in core. And two examples that have come up, which some operators historically have offered, is transportation and more additional food options. So if a child needs or a parent is looking for special dietary items or more regular food or transportation to and from a residence, that would not typically be offered by every childcare operator. So those would be two examples of things that we will explore. But of course, any definition of core and enhanced would be done in conjunction with parents and operators. We have an expert panel that is reviewing.
Thank you, Minister. I hesitate to interrupt, but it is now government caucus time for this next 20-minute block. Any members? MLA's here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the minister through you be okay with block time?
Yes, or back and forth, whatever you want to do.
Well, back and forth will work for me, sir, if you're open to that. All right.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the minister. I appreciate that. Minister, having heard all that you've been able to accomplish in your brief time as minister here, really fills me with hope. I will tell you that your work on the child care file is something that I think we can all say is moving forward. But there's a lot of things happening in the province, specifically about regional economic development alliances, so REDAs. One of those things that is important to all rural Alberta. For myself, I know that when the announcement came that there is going to be changes in the formula on how you're going to be calculating the funding to these from these REDAs, we had a lot of the partners within the REDAs really with some questions for you, sir. One of the partners that I had come through with a letter to my office, which I sent to yours, was the city of Cold Lake. I'd like to read a quick phrase, if that's okay with the.
We'll give you a little latitude.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, just a little though.
We've worked with our representative Rita in the Northeast Alberta Information Hub on a number of projects critical to the economic diversification of the city of Cold Lake and our surrounding region. We appreciate the effort and the foresight that the Northeast Alberta Information Hub's Executive Director, Bob Bezempalko, has brought to advocating for the region, identifying economic development opportunities, and working collaboratively with us on economic development projects. Now, one of the things he goes on to say inside of this letter is that they were invaluable on actually working towards an aircraft maintenance engineering school. We also had the REDAs also advocating for hemp, and we actually had our chair come up and speak regarding rail and Highway 28, the economic corridors. It shows that there's quite a diversity when it comes to what our REDAs are bringing forward, sir. And we even had the good fortune of even having you up, Mr. Minister, through the chair, of course. What happens is that you met with our local REDA, and you kind of gave a direction of where the government was going. And I can tell you that for myself, I'm very thankful, Minister, that you took the time out of your busy schedule to come all the way up to Northeast Alberta. It's a long drive, and I know that going all over the province like the way you have, just making sure that we're heard, we feel heard in rural Alberta. I myself, and I know my local REDA, also appreciates that, sir. So thank you for that. We appreciate that. But getting back to the questions at hand here, what we've got, getting back to this funding change, this is covered under 4.1 in the estimate, sir. Can the minister tell us why these changes are being undertaken and how this will impact budgeted funding for this year?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. So there are 9 RETAs across Alberta, which are independent, not-for-profit organizations made up of member municipalities and regional stakeholders. And they include the participation of approximately 53% of Alberta's municipalities. Alberta's government has funded these organizations at times over the years, but beginning in 2024-25, we will be transitioning RETAs from direct operational support to project-based funding, which all other economic development organizations across the province are currently on. RETAs will receive 3 years of transitional funding as they prepare to become operationally self-sufficient. Up to $125,000 is available to each RETA for each of the 3 years based on a formula that matches their membership revenue, which is reflective of their regional buy-in and regional investment. I'm happy to report that all 9 RETAs have entered into this grant agreement, with the majority receiving the maximum for this year. In addition to this funding, an independent consultant will be available to work with the RETAs to assist in planning and preparing for this transition. These supports and transition period will help RETAs adjust their business models in a sustainable way without impacting operations. RETAs are not the only regional economic development organizations across the province. As I referenced earlier, there's actually a multitude. Some others include Edmonton Global, Calgary Economic Development for the major urban centers, as well as Economic Development Lethbridge, Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo Economic Development and Tourism, Invest Grand Prairie, as well as Indigenous organizations. To serve all Alberta communities, the Ministry is enhancing the core services available for regional and local economic development, which I'll call the hub and spoke approach. The Ministry is also shifting to a more competitive grant funding approach to ensure the best value for money and that projects with the most promise can impact can leverage the grant dollars available. All regional economic development organizations, including RETAs, have access to a suite of programs, tools, and resources that will support their activities. And I want to mention some of those. We have across the province regional economic development specialists, professionals in field that work with economic development partners, including RETAs, on all things economic development. They help them wayfind, they'll help them, provide them advice, coaching, whatever's necessary to enhance their economic development efforts. We have workforce consultants, similar professionals, but they handle the workforce side, which is critical. Obviously, when trying to grow a region or attract investment, workforce is generally the second question you hear about. And we have the Northern Regional NRED program, which is a project-based grants, which are available to economic development organizations, including RETAs. They range from $20,000 to $200,000. They do require some matching, but there's a lot of funding there. There's actually a new and similar program available through agriculture and irrigation called the SCOP, or Small Communities Opportunities Program, I want to say, which offers up to $100,000 for economic development and at a lower match. We also are making RETAs an intake partner for what's called the Investment and Growth Fund, and that's a deal closing fund that offers up to a $5 million grant to close deals, job creating investments, and it's based on strategic fit with the province, how much capital they're investing, and how many jobs they're going to create. And this is a significant program. It was actually used to help attract a hemp investment that the member was referring to. And again, at $5 million, up to $5 million, this is a significant program that no individual RETA, no individual economic developer could afford this program, and yet now all 9 will be able to leverage it in their economic development efforts. And that is a great example of the efficiency and the leverage of a hub and spoke model. And I'll use one more. We have a number of economic development tools, labor market dashboards. We're just finalizing the release of a site selection tool. And this is one of the most impressive tools I've seen a government develop. It will enable economic development partners, including RETAs, to really showcase the sites that are available for businesses and investors in their region very quickly. And most of you have seen the demo of this site selection tool, but it really will save Rita perhaps months of work to do a presentation. Again, a piece of software that no individual economic developer could justify, that will leverage all economic development efforts across Alberta. And another proof point to me on the efficiency of building up the core or the hub and better serving the spokes. So maybe that addresses the first part of your question. Do you have a supplemental?
Yes, I do, Minister, and through you to the chair, thank you for that answer. You actually answered a couple of my questions, so good on you. You kind of got ahead of me there. One of the key objective 1.4, which states collaborate with community leaders, industry, business to diversify and grow their regional economies. This is a two-parter. How does the ministry prioritize these meetings with community leaders, industries, and businesses? And the second part of this question is, what specific feedback has come out of these consultations, and how have they impacted your ministry's business plan and budget?
JET works with stakeholders across the province to encourage economic growth, and we are ensuring all corners of the province can attract job-creating investment that support economic opportunities for all Albertans. Regional economic development is an important approach to diversify the economy and build investment readiness across the province. We recognize that communities across regions have unique and diverse economic opportunities and challenges which require targeted and tailored solutions. So in practice, what do those discussions look like? Certain regions will be interested in different industries, or they will be at different stages in their economic development journey. For example, some will have seen the remarkable success of the industrial heartland, and they're starting to think about their own business cluster or special economic zone or designated industrial zone. So those are the types of conversations we have. Other conversations with regions, they might want to see more diversifying investments from, say, our film and television program, which is a substantial part of this ministry. And it's discussions like that which inform the changes that we've proposed to the program, which will very much incentivize more production in rural and remote Alberta. Currently, about 3/4 of it happens in the greater Calgary area, but in the future, we hope to offer an incentive that will attract additional net new and push some existing activity out in rural Alberta. Other meeting I had with one of the regions, they wanted us to bolster regional air coverage. They're concerned about the diminishing commercial air traffic, and we certainly share their desire to maximize the value of our regional airports. So I took that away, and we're collaborating with Transportation and Economic Corridors on an initiative to enhance regional airports. So we very much do the meetings that you just talked about. We meet with municipalities, Indigenous groups. Post-secondaries are very critical in this exercise. We meet with chambers, local not-for-profits that are involved in the space, and we basically ask them, how can the province support you and leverage what you're already doing? For Lethbridge, that was the Lethbridge area, as you know, great irrigated land. We've put, I think, $700 million into it, and so they, of course, wanted us to promote their agri-processing capabilities on the global stage, and that's exactly what we did on our trade mission. So it's a back and forth of us reaching out, hearing what each region is interested in, and then very much trying to tailor our programs, and also to serve as a funnel of investment to them.
Thank you for that, Minister. I appreciate that. You know, it brings warmth to my heart when I hear that you're out there actually where the people are, sir. Really hearing what we have to say. And sometimes we have to do meetings here in Edmonton. I know that one of the meetings that we had brought in was you brought in the RETA chairs and the MLAs that are involved with the RETAs to discuss the change in funding. And, you know, it was a hard conversation, but sometimes we need to be looking at how do we repurpose a program into something that better works for the communities at large and the ministry as a whole. So the partnership funding agreement that you've got for my area showed that we were ending up with the maximum amount of funding available. So that shows that we didn't take a huge cut in the grant simply with this new funding formula, sir. So thank you for that. I know that you're being flexible through this, and you're trying to make sure that we're all taken care of through this process. And you also delivered the message face to face with these hard discussions to these business leaders and community leaders that are throughout. So thank you for that. You did touch already on Northern and Regional Economic Development Program. That's where my next set of questions are going to be. So when we talked about economic development, we often get lost in the Edmonton and Calgary corridor. But I know the province has paid close attention to northern communities like mine in Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul. But I know the province has paid close attention to other areas, specifically going down south and central Alberta. And their needs through this program are also being developed through other programs, but still through economic development. Underneath Section 4 of the budget estimates, what is the budget for the Northern Regional Economic Development Program this year, and how many projects will it help?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Very important program. So the Northern Regional Economic Development Program gives Alberta municipalities, Indigenous communities, and not-profit organizations with an economic development mandate the opportunity to receive funding for projects that promote regional economic growth and diversification, or NRED as I call it, has a dedicated application stream to support the unique economic priorities of Northern and Indigenous communities, including First Nations and Métis settlements, in addition to the broader regional development stream accessible to other regions like the south of the province. Approved applicants are eligible to receive between $20,000 and $200,000 per project. The project will provide up to 50% of total eligible project costs, while Indigenous applicants can receive up to 75% of total eligible project costs. To build Alberta's economic momentum, Alberta's government has committed up to $3 million annually for the NRED program in 2024 to 2027 to help deliver business supports, support labor force attraction and retention, enhance Alberta's tourism, and build capacity for economic growth. The number of projects that can be supported will vary based on the amount of funding requested by applicants for their projects. The maximum grant amount is $200,000, so a minimum of 15 projects will be supported with this funding. Examples of eligible projects include revitalizing central business districts, supporting new resources within a municipality or organization, creating wayfinding signage to direct shoppers or tourists, developing strategies to address local labor force gaps, and improving internet connectivity in commercial areas. And I should have touched on, in my previous answer, when we're going around and consulting, I also have a parliamentary secretary of small business and northern development, Parliamentary Secretary Tanny Yao. And he's doing the same thing, just very much from a northern lens and from a small business lens. And we also have the Northern Alberta Development Council, NADC, which is also collecting that feedback. And I believe in the North, and I believe in regional economic development, and it is my aspiration to very much enhance the tools, supports, resources, and incentives available to them. I also want to give them clear conduits to government, and I think Parliamentary Secretary Yao and the NADC could be positioned to do that in conjunction with strong local representatives like those at this table. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Minister, through the chair. And I will say that your parliamentary council has already reached out to my office and was requesting meetings throughout the summer coming up here. I'm very thankful that, you know what, he's taking his position as your parliamentary secretary seriously, and he's really wanting to make sure that he's reaching out to the northern communities because, sir, well, I have faith in you. I don't believe you can get everywhere. And that's where you really do need to lean on some of your colleagues. And this is where your parliamentary secretary, Tanny Yao, is doing a great job. I can tell you that he's getting in front of it, and this is something that we can all take credit for when we're seeing these successes. As for the NADC, I look forward to seeing what that can do for the north. I know that it's being reviewed right now, and I'm hopeful that we can see that council up and going again here soon. So one of the next questions here is what are the success stories of the NRED, and how has it made an impact on the north?
Yeah, and, so an example of the impact of past funding, the County of Grand Prairie recently completed their investment attraction implementation project. This project received NRED funding support in the program's first intake in 2022-23. For this project, the County of Grand Prairie retained a consultant that worked with key land development stakeholders and created a targeted strategy to offer investment-ready sites aimed at attracting new investment in the region. The county is positioned to sell over 100 investment-ready sites. As another example, Community Futures Lakeland hosted the Power Up North 2023 conference in October of 2023. Attendance exceeded projections at over 180 delegates. At this event, stakeholders had networking opportunities and received training at targeted workshops that included budget management and future-proofing finances, leadership, workforce retention, and tourism. In partnership with the Cold Lake First Nation, the event was hosted at the Hotel Dene and Conference Center, showcasing the First Nations venue as a prime tourist facility. So those are just two examples. I expect to see more because I think I found a little extra money for the NRED program. Again, I see tremendous value in what our partners are doing across the regions and Northern Alberta, and we certainly want to provide them with as much support as possible.
And with that, it ends our block, and we can start the 5-minute clock for the comfort break, if that works for everyone. So we'll see you back in 5. We will start without you. And for that last segment, I was definitely feeling the love in the room, so well done, everybody. Let's keep it up. grab your seats. We are onto what we've deemed as the rapid fire round as far as debates go. So it's back to 10-minute blocks. And again, you can combine time or block time depending on what you want, but you cannot cede your time. So with that, we're back to the loyal opposition. MLA? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to actually go back to, I think, a really important topic, as all of us in this room will certainly appreciate. Alberta is growing in population, but our public services remain under stress, particularly in healthcare. And this is relevant to this specific ministry because it was a promised part of the original Alberta is Calling tax credit proposal. Since 2023, 20,000 healthcare workers have left Alberta, according to Statistics Canada. And we're losing more healthcare workers than we're attracting. And certainly that should be a concern for all of us in this room. So my question again to the minister is, what is the government doing to attract and retain much-needed healthcare workers, if not through the Alberta is Calling tax credit? And does the ministry, specifically within Jobs and Economy and Trade, have any estimates or data on how many years it's going to take to perhaps reverse the trend of losing more healthcare workers than we gain? And furthermore, when should we expect to see job growth and in the healthcare sector to match Alberta's population growth as well as need? And I'll,
Still 3 minutes.
I still have 3 minutes. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay. Then I won't cede that time. I will move, in fact, to
For the first bit, but I'm glad your colleagues jumped in.
I'll move to a slightly different topic. I was actually surprised to learn that minimum wage was not addressed in any of the budget documents, either in the key objectives, and certainly was not in the mandate letter. And certainly the minister is aware that Alberta will soon be tied for the lowest minimum wage in Canada. Alberta's minimum wage remains at $15 an hour, while New Brunswick will increase to $15.30 on April 1st. And as we all know, Alberta is facing an affordability crisis. We're also currently dead last in wage growth. And unemployment has been up since this current government has been in office this year. There is a global freeze on the middle class, and Albertans are feeling it. According to Foodbank's Canada report from 2022, Albertans are accessing the food bank at an increased rate more than double the national average. And 115,000 Calgarians and 40,000 households could be on the brink of houselessness. And yet funding for jobs, programs, and supports is not keeping pace with job losses, and as well as if you consider the number of new Albertans who have come into this province. And I just want to draw your attention to line item 2.3 on page 148 of the government estimates. It's essentially under this line item, which I would imagine would encompass the bulk of the job programs and supports, it remains stagnant despite the population growth. So what is the government's plan to address stagnant wages? And will the minister commit to increasing the minimum wage to ensure that there is a living wage for Albertans? As well, since this government took office, a lower minimum wage for youth was introduced at $13 an hour. Can the ministry perhaps provide information on how many students currently, or young people, not just students, but young people, many of whom do actually live on $13 an hour, how many of them actually are earning this wage? Mr. Chair, we want to make sure that the recovery that we're seeing now is evenly distributed. And the reality is that not everybody, not every Albertan is sharing in some of the prosperity. This month, unemployment rose from 5.9 to 6.2%. And Alberta has among some of the worst employment rates in Canada for women aged 25 to 54, lagging behind the national average. And so what is this government doing to ensure that all Albertans are able to find meaningful employment, be able to obtain a livable wage, and ensure that the recovery that we're seeing is in fact equitable for all? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And with 6 seconds on the shot clock, Minister, back to you for your remainder of the block.
While I did not hear particular estimates lines, happy to comment on all the matters. Alberta continues to boast the highest weekly earnings in the country, so it's reasonable to expect that our growth rate may at times not be the fastest, but as of today, Alberta remains the highest in terms of weekly earnings. In terms of our unemployment rate creeping up, that's the result of us being very popular. Alberta, as you know, has been attracting record numbers of Canadians. 200,000 people moved here over a 12-month period last year. So while we have the fastest growing and strongest economy in Canada, we also have the fastest growing population. So those two things, at times, sometimes the interplay results in a slight uptick in unemployment. What are we doing about it? Well, we're obviously maintaining the best place in North America to invest or grow a business, i.e. create jobs. We're investing in training so people can upgrade their skills and achieve meaningful employment. We talked a lot about minimum wage. We definitely recognize that cost increases, inflation over the last few years have put pressure on Albertans, including those earning minimum wage. When comparing us to other jurisdictions, which was done in the questioning, there are additional factors that must be considered. Alberta has by far the highest basic personal amounts. Those basic personal amounts are indexed. We have relative cost of living advantages over other jurisdictions, which is why you see Canadians coming to Alberta, because it has arguably the best mix of employability earnings versus cost of living. We also don't have a sales tax, which means that Albertans, unlike other Canadians, keep more of what they earn. And when you factor in the other relevant factors, Alberta is more middle of the pack. But with that being said, Alberta is constantly evaluating the minimum wage in terms of its appropriateness, and that work is ongoing right now. I believe you started off with a question around the challenges with population growth and maintaining strong public services, and that is how our Premier and our government spends most of its time. We are growing rapidly, and we have also demographic changes in terms of an aging population that must be addressed in our healthcare delivery. We've seen so many young families come here. Our education system is certainly seeing really record enrollment growth, which is going to require more students and more staff. But I'll take the question back to jobs, economy, and trade and say this is why we are being very intentional with who we are looking to attract to Alberta. We are looking to attract the people with the skills that are necessary to address the challenges. So if you're growing so rapidly, you should probably address housing. You should address healthcare. You should build some schools. And if you want to maintain your ability to provide high-paying jobs for Albertans, you need to continue to attract job creators, and that means you need to be able to build the facilities that they have chosen for Alberta. So this all goes back to the Alberta's Calling Skilled Trades Attraction Bonus. We were being very intentional with who we were calling, and because we need those people to address the challenges that Alberta is facing and Albertans are facing, including in healthcare. So I hope that answers most of your questions.
And thank you. Okay, over to the Government Caucus now for 10 minutes. MLA Stephanie.
Thank you, Chair. And through the Chair to the Minister, would he be okay with back and forth discussion to the questions and the answers?
sorry, member, I was being provided advice. Can you repeat your question?
Minister, just the members asking if you want it combined or blocked.
Oh, easy. Let's go back and forth.
Great, great. I'm going to be focusing my questions on outcome 1 of the business plan, which states the ministry creates the conditions where business, investment, and trade can thrive, creating jobs and economic opportunity for Albertans. And Minister, I'm sure you're aware of the Statistics Canada February 2024 labor force survey, where it reported that Alberta added 17,000 jobs, and that was 43% of the total jobs added in the entire country, despite Alberta only comprising 12% of the population. That certainly is a very encouraging statistic. And I'm just wondering, maybe to ask the first question is, what specific work your ministry is undertaking to create conditions favorable to investment, trade, and job growth?
A great question. And the February numbers, which was, I think, 17,400, what was more impressive to me about them was that about 16,000 of those were full-time jobs, which is something I always look for. And it represented about 100,000 net jobs over the last 12 months. So Alberta, as you pointed out, continues to outperform. So Jobs, Economy and Trade works with the Government of Alberta ministries and our partners across the province, such as economic development organizations and the federal government, to foster economic growth, support the success of Alberta entrepreneurs and job creators, and promote the development of Alberta's industries so that more Albertans can prosper. The ministry serves as the government's driver of economic strategy, working in close collaboration with multiple partner ministries to deliver programs and create policies that improve Alberta's investment competitiveness and encourage economic growth. The ministry also helps Alberta communities realize their diverse economic potential through regional economic development programs and policies, such as the Northern and Regional Economic Development Program we discussed earlier. It works closely with small businesses and entrepreneurs to help them navigate programming and the business ecosystem, and it provides large companies with concierge services to help them make positive investment decisions, which include sharing information on how they can access grants through the Investment and Growth Fund. The ministry also leads initiatives like Alberta at Work, which provides a framework to address current and long-term labor market challenges by attracting talent, delivering responsive programming, and ensuring businesses have access to the skilled workforce required to grow and diversify Alberta's economy. The ministry is actively engaged in promoting trade and expanding market access for Alberta businesses through trade missions, and is committed to working with national and international partners to advance shared interests that can lead to new opportunities for peoples and businesses in Alberta and around the world. The ministry incentivizes trade through the Alberta Export Expansion Program, which promotes outbound international business travel and incoming buying expeditions. Our government's actions have helped to turn and keep Alberta as Canada's economic engine, and in turn, our strong economy is helping make life more affordable and enjoyable for all Albertans.
Thank you for that, Minister, and through the chair. I appreciate those specific strategies. When I look at the federal government strategy of paying billions of dollars in bribes to companies, costing about $4 million per job, I think our strategy is much better. So really appreciate that. Minister, I note as well that Alberta and Saskatchewan are the only provinces with a top marginal tax rate of less than 50%. I'd be interested in how the Alberta tax advantage of having low tax rates, not only the top marginal rates, but in terms of our lowest corporate rate, which we reduced a few years ago under the Conservative government, has contributed as well to the competitive advantage that Alberta enjoys.
Yeah, our tax competitiveness comes up in most conversations with investors because it's relevant to their businesses, it's relevant to their staff, and it's one piece of the Alberta Advantage. And as I touched on earlier, the other piece is our pro-business efforts as a government, which includes our red tape reduction efforts. So we want to, we can't always offer the strongest incentives, particularly with the United States and the IRA, but where we can compete is on speed and certainty. So in addition to maintaining very low and attractive tax rates for businesses and professionals, we are actively streamlining our regulation and reducing red tape. And another piece of the Alberta Advantage that we're working on really solidifying again is the cost of doing business, including insurance and utilities. As you know, our government is looking at both of these. I think long-term, it's very important that we ensure that we have reliable and affordable electricity for Albertans, but also our businesses, and that businesses of all types can access insurance. So, high level, I consider our low combined tax rate to be a massive competitive advantage, and I think it may explain some of the interprovincial migration that we're seeing. People are obviously facing affordability challenges in other areas of Canada, and the biggest thing they're paying is taxes. When you really look at it, that's one of their largest costs is taxes. And in Alberta, I say they can earn more, and they can save more, and they can live more. And that's the message that we deliver across Canada, but also to investors around the world.
Thank you, Minister. I know that we're running close on time. I do want to just raise one other question, and I appreciate the member from Edmonton South raising the concern about per capita GDP, because I think, honestly, every member in this room is concerned about Canada's per capita GDP and how it's falling behind the United States. Now, fortunately, Alberta is certainly the most prosperous jurisdiction and province. I was looking it up, and Statistics Canada, they had 2022 statistics, and Alberta did enjoy the highest per capita GDP of any of the provinces. And as you mentioned, I mean, because Alberta is a land of opportunity, and we do have record migration, sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect because, of course, there's a dilutive effect when people are moving to Alberta because it is such a land of freedom and opportunity. And sometimes in terms of getting up and getting to work and producing more GDP, sometimes there is some dilution there. I'm just wondering, in terms of the ministry, what strategies are you putting into place with these new Albertans coming to Alberta to help them have jobs and contribute to Alberta's top of Canada real per capita GDP?
Yeah, good question. So one thing we're doing was we're trying to reduce barriers to labor mobility across Canada. We think it's in Canada's interest for people to be able to work in the field of their skills and education as quickly as possible. As you know, another part of our government is looking at foreign credential recognition, so that again, we can get people working in their highest and most productive capacity, as opposed to really producing less than they could. And part of that ties into our international trade efforts, because when we go on trade missions, one of the things that we discuss with leaders of other countries is how can we find greater alignment in our educational institutions so that when people come to Alberta from, say, the Philippines or India, that they are able to work in engineering or nursing more quickly. Because to your point, we do have a lot of people coming here, and to maintain that productivity, we have to ensure that they're working in their highest and best field and as quickly as possible, so that there are limited delays, because that's why you see at times the unemployment tip up as a result of population growth, despite our incredible economic activity.
Perfect. That ends the first 10 minutes. And just a reminder for all members, it makes it really easy for the chair to understand debate when you reference the estimate documents themselves. It saves on points of order, and quite frankly, if the other side here has been doing it really well all evening, I would encourage all members to follow that example. Over to the loyal opposition, please. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Minister, would you like block time or do you want to go back and forth?
I would like block time, thank you.
Mr. Chair, will start with the background of the issue and we'll link it with the budget so members in the room don't feel that I'm trying to talk about something other than the budget. In the annual report from 2022 to 2023, it was mentioned that there were 278 inquiries regarding small business issues in the BizConnect program. And those inquiries were related to capital funding, resources, etc. And it seems like based on the number of small businesses and the number of people who have immigrated to Alberta and people who are coming here, and based on the people who want to start their own business, 278 is a very low number. So what is the ministry doing to increase the funding for promoting this program so small businesses can know more about this program? And where is that located in budget 2024? Also, is there any increase for the funding for this program in this year, as this program provides the critical information that small businesses really need to be successful? And second thing is about small and medium enterprise relaunch grant program. We all know that COVID pandemic adversely impacted the small businesses in Alberta, and I understand that provincial government started a small and medium enterprise relaunch grant program. There were two post-payment audits were launched to demonstrate the effectiveness of the program. Mr. Chair, through you, I would like to ask that Minister, what were the results of those audits and will those be made public? It is also mentioned that more audit analysis will continue in this year, and so I would like to know the results of the previous year. On page 148 of government estimates, it is mentioned that the economic analytics and industry growth funding will significantly decrease this year by more than $5 million. Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister, why is stimulating economy and industry growth not a priority for the government? On page 96 of business plan, it is mentioned that economic development and trade had a budget of $188 million, which will be $160 million this year, and then $136 million in 26-27. Alberta has seen the highest interprovincial migration in these years. These people coming to Alberta have dreams, skills, and abilities to grow the economy. They will support the growth of the economy. And Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister, why is the government spending less on economic development, and which government programs will be impacted by this decrease in funding and by how much? Small business profiles are important tools that governments can publish to provide the clear picture of the state of small businesses. It also connects the small businesses to the resources that the government of Alberta can provide to them. Government of Alberta used to publish that until 2013. Government of British Columbia still publishes those reports. Is this government considering publishing the reports or something similar that can provide information regarding the small businesses? And Canadian Federation of Independent Business survey shows that long-term optimism index now sits at 49.5 points, which is 10 points decline since spring. The short-term optimism index also sits at 49.5 points, which is a 14-point drop since summer. This shows that optimism among small businesses declining rapidly in Alberta, and overwhelmingly majority of them, 71% of the surveyed small businesses, are worried about the insurance costs. My question is that how this budget will address the rising cost of insurance on small businesses. Is there a specific line item in the budget dedicated specifically to support small businesses dealing with the rising costs of doing business? aviation sector funding is another important thing. It employs more than 25,000 Albertans, and $5 million was provided last year. So I would like to know if that funding will continue, if there is any rationale, if that funding will not be continued, and where is that located in the budget line item. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And with 12 seconds, Minister, back to you.
Thank you. So Jobs, Economy and Trade serves as the government's driver of economic policy and strategy to support business competitiveness and growth. Small, medium enterprises, or SMEs, are a significant contributor to Alberta's economy and key to supporting the province's economic growth and diversification. SMEs, which are defined as a business with less than 500 employees, make up 99.8% of Alberta's businesses, and they employed 54% of workers in Q3 of 2023. The Ministry's business plan focuses on delivering client-centered programs and tools to support Alberta's economic growth and diversification, including support for small businesses to be resilient and competitive. Businesses in Alberta continue to identify concerns with ongoing inflation, rising interest rates and debt costs, input costs, and labor supply challenges. Small businesses often face these pressures more acutely. Our government has taken quick and effective action to cut costs and deliver relief to Alberta businesses. Alberta's general corporate income tax rate is currently 8%, which is the lowest among Canadian provinces and among the lowest in North America. Alberta's small business tax rate is 2%, and Alberta businesses also benefit from no provincial sales tax, no payroll tax, and no healthcare premiums. In 2023, our government also suspended the provincial fuel tax, providing much needed relief at the pumps. Our government also supports small businesses to grow and thrive through information and coaching, as well as programs to address labor shortages and immediate pressures. The Ministry is considering ways to support programs addressing gaps in succession planning and business resiliency, which have been identified as key areas of concerns for small and medium businesses. I will now highlight some of the initiatives in the suite of supports for small businesses that are offered through my ministry. So BizConnect. Pathfinding supports are provided through the Ministry's BizConnect services, helping small businesses to start, grow, and succeed. BizConnect helps small businesses access advice and coaching, financing, training, and information about market expansion and grant funding. Small businesses that contact the department are provided with help accessing and applying for available supports and are connected to local resources, associations, and organizations for additional coaching, mentoring, and relevant information. So BizConnect received 369 inquiries from April 2023 to January 24, of which 169 were around entrepreneur supports, 168 were around funding or grant inquiries, 23 were general inquiries, and 9 were related to Indigenous businesses. Through Budget 2024, my ministry continues to provide multi-year funding to BusinessLink. BusinessLink provides free one-on-one advice and coaching and information, including financial resources to Albertans who operate a small business. BusinessLink offers its core services to about 1,000 clients per fiscal quarter and served 4,700 clients in 2022-23. Additionally, the organization delivers tailored support to approximately 100 Indigenous entrepreneurs and 250 immigrant entrepreneurs every quarter through dedicated services. The Digital Economy Program is funded through a multi-year grant to BusinessLink from my ministry and provides free services open to home-based business or commercial businesses to take their businesses online. As of January 2024, almost 7,000 businesses have gone through this program. My ministry also provides grant funding to Futurepreneur, which helps entrepreneurs start and grow through advice and information. Futurepreneur also offers loans of up to $60,000 to entrepreneurs aged 18 to 39 as part of the program. Entrepreneurs are paired with a business mentor to support them through the process. In addition, my ministry offers supports that help businesses address labor shortages. The Canada-Alberta Jobs Grant provides employer-driven training where government and employers share in the cost of training new and existing employees. Alberta's government has committed over $600 million over 3 years through Alberta at Work to help Albertans develop new skills and grow their careers. In terms of stimulating the economy, we do this in a number of ways. We have obviously different grant streams that are stimulating the economy. I'll highlight some recent successes. The Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program, which has attracted the likes of Dow, project that at peak construction will employ around 7,000 people with hundreds of permanent jobs afterwards. We've recently set up the Agri-Processing Investment Tax Credit to obviously incentivize agri-processing capital investments. That too has seen significant interest, and I'm anticipating some announcements in the near future. We do this through the Investment and Growth Fund. Again, a deal closing fund that awards companies deal closing grants based on their strategic fit with Alberta's diversification and economic growth priorities, and it's also based on the amount of capital investment and jobs they're going to create. We have things like the film and television tax credit, which again is stimulating the economy.
Hesitate to interrupt. It is now back to members of the government caucus.
Thank you, Chair.
MLA Dijon.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Minister for being here tonight. Minister, did you want to proceed with block time or share time?
Back and forth.
Sounds good. Well, as you know, I have a strong background in economics and public policy, and so I've been following with great interest the work of yourself and your team, and I can say I'm so proud to call the Alberta that we live in today home, and that is in no small part due to the good work of yourself. And as you know, I represent the constituency of Chestnut-Strathmore, which has seen incredible levels of investment. And I had the opportunity to see one of our municipal partners earlier today. And under the conditions created by the provincial government, they have been able to attract so much investment and bring job and wealth creators to the province. And you spoke about this in your opening statement, about the role of the provincial government to create conditions for success. And attracting investment is a top priority for the ministry. It's noted one of the first things in the business plan, key objective 1.1, that we rely on global investment as a foundation of our economy. And so, Minister, I'm wondering, how is international trade changing or evolving for Alberta? And what are some of the global investments we have seen in Alberta, and what are the impacts that we are seeing of these investments?
Okay, a lot there. So Alberta is, in relative terms, a small global economic player. We have an abundance of resources and products to export, and we rely on trade of these. For this reason, Alberta has traditionally been a strong supporter of free trade and of free trade agreements. We benefit from a global system of rules that applies equally to all countries, big and small, encourages transparency and consistency, which benefits companies, and offers a systematic way to manage disputes. Alberta is globally connected through 15 international free trade agreements, through which we have preferred market access to 51 foreign countries and more than 1.5 billion potential customers. These trade agreements provide a broad range of benefits to Alberta companies. These include a number of specific chapters that address the broad range of trade issues. The Trade in Goods chapter deals with importing and exporting physical products. These chapters address issues with tariffs and non-tariff barriers, such as regulatory barriers that block the trade of specific goods. The Services and Investment chapters relate to the supply of services across borders, including things like professional services like engineering or legal, business establishment and investment, and the movement of people. These chapters can involve significant provincial jurisdiction and require active provincial engagement and consent. The Government Procurement chapter is about rules related to open government procurement. Our interest here is in managing procurement costs and ensuring that Alberta companies have access to procurement markets in other countries. Other chapters in the agreements address the relationships of trade agreements to other social issues, as well as matters such as intellectual property, competition, and the behavior of state-owned enterprises. Alberta has jurisdictional interests in all of these chapters. And of course, trade agreements offer a formal mechanism to manage disputes. Alberta takes these commitments seriously as they offer traders and investors the comfort of knowing that countries have committed to respect the provisions of trade agreements and can be held accountable if they do not. We want to build on these agreements and expand on markets in Asia, Europe, and globally. My department leads Alberta's engagement in Canada's international free trade negotiations, working with other departments and stakeholders to identify and promote provincial interests. This is outlined in the 2024-27 business plan. Outcome 1, Key Objective 3, promote Alberta's trade interests on the global stage and support Alberta businesses to diversify into new international markets and advance and defend Alberta's interests in the negotiation of international agreements to enhance trade and investment. We advocate for Alberta to ensure that as trade agreements develop, they reflect our market access priorities and investment goals. We seek outcomes that will reduce tariff and non-tariff barriers for our exports, particularly our meat and egg products. and provide certainty for investors and facilitate the movement of business professionals. Our goal is to give Alberta companies greater confidence that there will be transparent and predictable rules in other countries that govern goods, services, investment, and labor mobility. We also work to protect and defend our jurisdictional interests to ensure the federal government does not make commitments in areas of provincial jurisdiction without full provincial engagement and consent. When needed, we push back against negotiating proposals that could undermine our energy and natural resource development. My department will continue to pursue Alberta's interests in Canada's trade negotiations, including in active negotiations with Indonesia, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and Ecuador. And our work doesn't stop once trade agreements are in force. We promote the benefits of existing trade agreements to Alberta exporters and industry, such as the benefits of our agreements with the European Union and Trans-Pacific Partnership countries, where we have preferential access to some of the largest economies in the world, with a collective gross domestic product of around 30 trillion. So that's kind of what we do.
Thank you, through the chair, to the minister for your answer. We know trade is critical to the economic success of Alberta, and you've spoken about key objective 1.3, which is listed on page 3 of the business plan, of the importance of trade. And I see that on line 4.3 of the estimates, the province has budgeted $27.416 million for trade this year. Can you speak to, in addition to what you've already mentioned, what specific supports and guidance your ministry offers businesses trying to expand internationally or even interprovincially?
Yeah, and before I do that, I just want to highlight some of our recent investments because I think you asked about that in your previous question. Apologies. So in November 2023, Dow Chemical announced its $11.6 billion Path to Zero project located in Alberta's industrial heartland. The Path to Zero project will expand and renovate Dow's existing manufacturing site in Fort Saskatchewan to create the world's first net zero carbon emissions integrated ethylene cracker and derivatives site. This investment represents an important expansion of Alberta's natural gas industry. It will diversify our economy, position our province as a global hub for petrochemicals, all while maintaining reliability and affordability in the energy sector. Construction is expected to start later this spring, and at its peak will create between 6,000 and 7,000 Alberta jobs. Once fully operational, the project will create 400 to 500 high-quality full-time jobs in the province, plus contractors. Alberta's business-friendly policies, skilled workforce, and programs like APIP, which I referenced earlier, help make Alberta the clear choice for investments like this. And I should note that my department led a cross-ministry concierge team to help ensure that Dow made the correct final investment decision. I'm also excited to highlight investments announced by de Havilland Canada. In September of 2022, de Havilland Canada announced its new aircraft manufacturing facility, de Havilland Field in Wheatland County. This facility represents $250 to $300 million in capital investment and is expected to break ground mid-2024. And this is only the beginning. De Havilland is planning a 10 to 15-year construction schedule for a larger campus in Wheatland County, which will include educational and training space as well as general office buildings. This project is expected to generate upwards of 3,000 Alberta jobs with an estimated capital investment approaching $1 billion. My ministry worked with de Havilland and our federal counterparts to support the European Union's purchase of de Havilland water bomber aircraft in November of 2023, and that was a substantial transaction. So international trade missions help Alberta companies get a foot in the door in potential markets. They allow companies to assess market viability, meet potential buyers, and explore global partnerships and value chains. Missions to international markets also allow an opportunity to build relations at the highest levels of government and create awareness and recognition for Alberta internationally. Alberta continues to be at the forefront in many areas of our traditional oil and gas and agricultural sectors. And we want to bring those new and emerging opportunities in clean tech, innovation, and technology and life sciences also. Countries and businesses all over the world want Alberta's expertise, technology, products, and services. By increasing exports for these businesses, we are also supporting job creation, revenue growth, and a more resilient consumer base for Alberta companies. We work with our partners in the trade ecosystem to support Alberta companies in developing and growing their international exports. This year, my ministry will be leading 24 trade missions around the world, including in the regions of the Middle East and Africa, North Asia, Indo-Pacific, the Americas, and of course Europe. As economies around the world become more intertwined, international trade becomes even more important to the Alberta economy. And I want to pause there and just highlight two recent trips that we made to Japan and the Middle East, to the UAE. In both cases, our countries were blown away at how advanced Alberta was in terms of hydrogen, carbon capture, utilization and storage, and even our transition off of coal-fired electricity, which many countries are still coal-dominant. And they were very interested in our ability to supply them with democratic and reliable energy and food. So I see international trade as an area that this ministry needs to double down on, needs to focus more resources on, and that's what we're going to try to do.
Perfect, and right to the wire, over to the loyal opposition. MLA Sweet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Minister, just before I ask you to go back and forth, I just want to let you know that the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes, if you'll go back and forth with me, is going to be specifically about OH&S, first responders, and the first responders and support psychology piece in relation to the upcoming wildfire season and how we're going to keep our wildland firefighters safe. I would ideally like to go back and forth, and if your deputy ministers could maybe answer some questions, if you're not comfortable, I think that would be best, because the questions that are coming up are obviously related to the pilot that passed away, as well as how we're going to protect them moving forward. So will you go back and forth with me?
Let's do block time.
Okay, it's disappointing. So I'll refer to page 146 when we look at occupational health and safety, specifically the Alberta Heroes Fund for First Responders and supporting psychological health and first responders program. Also on page 94, 3.1, working with stakeholders, employers and workers to implement changes to the Occupational Health and Safety Code to protect health and welfare of Alberta workers, as well as 3.A on page 94, OH supports health and safe workplaces by completing field activities 2023, moving into the 2024 period. Going back to what I was saying. So we had a very, very extreme wildfire season last year. We deployed many frontline workers. Many of those workers were contracted. Because they were contracted, the supports that are provided on behalf of the government through those contracts vary than if it was to be considered a full-time public servant employee. Now, because of that, many wildland firefighters work short contracted periods that are only contracted at 7.25 hours, but yet they're expected to work longer than 7.25 hours in a day. Their wage is one of the lowest wages across the country, and they also don't receive any additional health or mental health supports once their contract is up. So, for example, for the wildland firefighters that responded to the death of the pilot, they responded with basic first aid, because that is the minimal requirement of the wildland firefighters, and unfortunately have not received any mental health supports since that incident because their contract ended. I think that is a failure on behalf of the government in general, non-party specific, just in how we are looking at supporting wildland firefighters and really contracted support, whether it be first responders in relation to wildfire or whether it be contracted workers in other areas of the government, people who are putting up pivots or using equipment to help clear fire lines or whatever it is. Ultimately, people are putting their lives at risk while they're responding to this. And yet we do not have a clear occupational health and safety standard to ensure the safety of those contracted workers. And so my question was, what are we doing and what have we learned since last year? I don't want to see another worker not go home at the end of the day.
And just remember, just give me a glance once in a while through the chair, that'd be awesome.
3.8, page 94. The reason for that is that I believe that every worker should go home, and I believe that we should have some learnings from last year in regards to what happened. So my other question through the chair would be, what have we learned? The second question would be, how are we protecting these workers as they go out this season? What is the base minimum for first aid requirements for our wildland firefighters and their teams, whether it be dispatchers or any of those other members? The equipment standards, and have they been met and have they been certified? to ensure that all the workers that are going out have the safety equipment that they need, and has the warehouse been cleared out and all of that equipment been certified? Are we ensuring that the training is up to standard and that we are not, as we have heard from last year through the chair, that wildland firefighters were being sent out without appropriate training because the hiring wasn't happening at the rate of the fires? And how are we protecting the workers to ensure that their training is appropriate and that they're being kept safe? That includes chainsaw training, among other things. Because ultimately, as the employer and as the signer of those contracts, it falls on the government to make sure that those workers are safe. So whether they're contract or not, I would like to hear from the government what we're doing to keep the workers safe, because they don't feel like they are right now. And they're really stressed about the equality, or not the quality, they're really stressed about the amount of people they're gonna be able to be deployed when the season starts. And then in addition, would like the government to please also answer what they're doing for mental health supports past the end of the contract. Because many of these workers need support year-round. And they don't seem to have access to it. So whether that's a communication factor and whether that's a piece of that, but normally they have WCB and normally they have health benefits up until the contract ends. So if that's the case, we need to look at some kind of bridging system to ensure that there's supports available.
And Minister, your time to respond, 5 minutes.
Yeah. So thank you for the important questions. I'll touch on a few things, then I'll probably get my ADM to comment on WCB specific items. And then, actually, I think the bulk of your questions may be appropriate for forestry and parks as well. But so in terms of Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Trade, the government recognizes the importance of workers being able to access support when they are injured at work, and this includes getting help in relation to occupational diseases. Alberta also places importance on work done to better understand and prevent occupational diseases in the first place. Presumptions for certain workplace-related illnesses help eligible workers and their families receive the benefits and support they need with fewer delays and hurdles, as they do not need to prove their illness or injury was caused due to work. Without a presumption, a worker can still submit a workers' compensation claim to access benefits through the regular claim process. The WCB helps all workers diagnosed with work-related illnesses or injuries, including psychological, to get the treatment and supports they need. The presumptions that certain cancers, for example, are work-related, recognize the great risks that firefighters take to protect Albertans' lives and property. Through expanding presumptive coverage for the firefighters who fought, for example, in the 2016 Fort McMurray wildfire, Alberta's government improved cancer coverage for all firefighters. Alberta was one of the first provinces to provide presumptions to firefighters for work-related cancers, and Alberta's government continues to regularly review evidence and hear input from firefighters and other emergency workers regarding workers' compensation benefits. There are currently 20 cancers and associated exposure periods included in the firefighter's primary site cancer regulation. And I won't list those, but I can get those to you. Firefighters exposed to fire scene hazards in Fort McMurray between May 1st and June 1st of 2016 are exempt from the exposure period requirements for the firefighter cancer presumptions. And that's because the Fort McMurray fires were exceptional, and those who fought it faced abnormal risks, which is why we provided a special exemption to the exposure period. The large number of structural fires burning at the same time and the number of firefighters involved made this single event really unprecedented. The exemption introduced to the Workers' Compensation Act in 2023 recognizes their sacrifices and efforts and helps firefighters and their families access the benefits they need with fewer delays and hurdles. And those came into effect March 28th, 2023. So the other thing I wanted to chat about was the SPIFER program, which you had referenced. In August 2020, the government announced the commitment of $1.5 million annually for the Supporting Psychological Health in First Responders Grant Program. The Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Trade administers the grant, and the program provides grants to improve services for first responders who are living with or are at risk of developing post-traumatic stress injuries. The program has two streams: services focusing on supporting not-for-profit organizations in delivering services for first responders, including supporting early intervention and resilience building, and applied research, supporting applied research to develop and evaluate effective programs and services for first responders living with or at risk for post-traumatic stress injuries. In 23-24, 31 applications were received and 19 projects were approved for funding totaling $1.5 million, and the 13 were service providers and 6 were researchers. We also have a Heroes Fund, which we've established. There's no higher form of public service than risking one's life to maintain public safety, and Alberta's government is honoring that. And that's why we established the First Responders Heroes Fund grant. And what this is, it provides additional benefits to families of first responders who die as a result of performing their duties. And this was really done in conjunction with the SPIFER, the Supporting Psychological Health in First Responders grant, to provide funding for nonprofit organizations that provide services to first responders. And then my ADM, Miles.
Thank you, Minister. Miles Morris, ADM of Safe Care and Health Workplaces. Briefly, in the time we have left, I'll touch on portions of the member's question that deal with matters that are within our ministry's purview. Would note that occupational health and safety requirements apply to both direct employees and to contracted workforces, and would also note that if a worker had suffered a mental injury at work, even if the contract had ended, would be eligible.
Okay, perfect, thank you for that. And over to the Government Caucus. MLA Wright, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the Minister. Minister, you've touched on a lot of really important topics.
Are we going back and forth or block?
Yes,
No
yes,
problem,
yes,
just
yes.
clarification.
If you'd be so kind, I'd love to have a conversation, so if we could go back and forth, that would be splendid.
Okay.
Apologies again, Chair. Just too ambitious today, I see. So you touched on a lot of different pieces that are very important to my constituency. You know, you talked about the future of hydrogen, helium, ammonia, which are all really great industries that can expand in for my areas, because we're seeing big expansion in those. Aerospace, aviation, and defenses, you know, they'll need new access to international markets. You also touched on K-12 and bringing trades into that education stream. We've got a great school division down in the constituency of Cypress Medicine, Prairie Rose School Division. They've got collegiate programs that can graduate fully trained students into their trade within about 2 years of graduating from high school. So really great things to hear that have been brought up this evening. Now, I'm aware childcare's recently moved back, or not back, but has recently moved into jobs, economy, and trade. And I see that the budget for this file is outlined under 5.1 and 5.2 of the estimates. Now, as you may know, Mr. Chair, Alberta's government is currently in the third year of the Canada-Alberta, Canada-wide Early Childhood Learning Agreement with the federal government. Now, something that was a bit concerning and brought up was the Prime Minister recently accused the province of sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars from the feds as part of this agreement. Can you tell us how this has been misunderstood? And could you also answer how many additional dollars has the province put forward, and is it on pace to spend all that's required in this agreement?
Yeah, good question, and I'm happy to clarify. So this goes back to an answer I provided earlier around the timing of the signing of the agreement. The agreement was signed between Alberta and the federal government in November of 2021, and implementation started shortly afterwards. And of course, that meant that effectively Alberta had only one quarter in the first fiscal year of the agreement to implement the agreement. And what this has created is the necessity for carry forward of funds. Effectively, the funds that were not spent in the other 3 quarters of that first year have been carried forward to the subsequent fiscal years in the agreement. We do anticipate spending all of those carry forwards in the next year, and the agreement does allow for up to 10% of carry forward of funds. We don't anticipate exceeding that anymore. So in other words, this should be the last excess carry forward. Alberta is leaving no money on the table. We're gonna obviously take every dollar we're eligible for. We're investing $1.7 billion alongside the agreement, and again, that does not include all of the investments we're making in childcare, because of course there's childcare provided in this province that is not covered under the CA-ELCC. No, Alberta has not. Alberta is not sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars. It will be utilized for affordability and access and inclusion. It will be used to satisfy the commitments of the agreement, and we are currently doing just that.
Well, thank you, Minister, through the chair. If I can transition around, away from childcare, to attraction and retention strategies. One of Jobs, Economy and Trade's biggest mandates is creating and supporting attraction and retention strategies to promote Alberta as Canada's destination for choice for skilled talent. Looking at strategies and programs like Alberta's Calling, Training for Work programs, the Canada-Alberta Job Grant, the Aviation Skills Grant program, additional bonuses like our reservist leaves that protect reservists. Can you speak to the strategies, programs, and supports that your ministry offers, and how many are receiving funding in this budget? And how much of that funding and what impact will the funding provide on these programs and strategies?
Yeah, good question. So, Jobs, Economy and Trade will direct funding for skills development and training programs in 24-25 by continuing to make additional investments in the Canada-Alberta Jobs Grant to help workers access training for skills needed for businesses to grow and diversify. The 24-25 program budget is $24 million, which will help meet program demand and assist with preparing Alberta's workers to best contribute to economic recovery. Over 10,000 employees were supported by approximately 4,000 employers. That's the number that will be able to access training through the Canada-Alberta Jobs Grant. Training for Work, our suite of short-term training programs, support unemployed Albertans to get back to work. These programs are available in over 50 communities and provide skills training and employment services to over 4,000 Albertans. We will be providing $5 million to the Aviation Skills Grant to help employers and communities throughout Alberta to obtain the workers and skills required to maintain and grow their businesses. We also make strategic investments through partnership grants in organizations that provide workforce development and training solutions for the province's priority sectors. Budget 2024 includes $45 million over the next 2 years through Alberta at Work to support skills attraction and development, training programs, and to ensure robust data and analytics are available to support operational and policy improvements. And I should note that we are one of many ministries that are participating in Alberta at Work. You've got Seniors, Community and Social Services, Advanced Education, and Indigenous Relations, even transportation. There's training and workforce development occurring in virtually every Government of Alberta ministry, and it's a major pillar of our government's efforts over the next few years. That's why it was included in so many mandate letters.
Well, thank you for that really great information. If I can tie it back and transition again, you mentioned earlier in some of the answers around some of the changes to OH&S, and ensuring workers get home safely is important to everyone as a part of our efforts in this government in recent years. I know we've begun to look at Occupational Health and Safety Code updates. Specifically, Objective 3.1 states that your ministry is working with stakeholders, employers, and workers to implement changes to the OH&S code to protect health and safety and welfare of Albertans. Now, in my background, I spent 20 plus years in business, partners in injury reduction audits and inspections were a regular occurrence, as we had a health and safety team in nearly every single employer that reviewed, inspected, whether it would be racking equipment, you name it, right? And then we'd have third-party auditors that came in as part of the injury reduction inspections. And we found a great diminishing of number of OH&S claims and issues because we were being proactive in addressing situations. Now, What could never really be adjusted for was the freak accidents, right, where something happens. So I guess tying it into the question, how do you ensure compliance and enforcement of new changes that will continue to supplement with these kind of business practices that are out in the open market with regards to inspections and reductions efforts to reduce accidents and injuries?
Thank you. So our OHS officers conduct inspections of work sites in Alberta every day. These inspections are done proactively based on evidence around higher risk industries and occupations, as well as in response to complaints. The goal of these inspections is to determine whether the worksite parties are meeting their legal requirements, and officers use a range of tools to achieve compliance. It starts with education, as some contraventions can be easily corrected on site by clarifying requirements, and further compliance actions are not needed. Officers also issue compliance orders for corrective actions if a contravention cannot be corrected immediately. In situations where work activity or equipment presents an immediate danger, officers will issue stop work and stop use orders to address the hazard. And finally, our officers can issue tickets and administrative penalties for certain violations of the legislation. And I enjoyed your commentary before your question. That is how the system is supposed to work. Safety is everybody's responsibility. And through education and proactive prevention initiatives and just ensuring that everybody's taking responsibility for safety, we can get ahead of most workplace incidents. Of course, it's hard to prevent everything, but that's why we certainly prioritize industries and types of work that are higher risk, where we foresee the potential for greater injury, so that we can, again, try to mitigate those issues before they happen. So thank you for doing that work in your previous life.
And back to, there we go. Emily? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a couple through the chair, I'd like to just ask the ministry again. These are a couple questions that weren't covered or weren't answered completely. So one is, what is the plan for 2026 when the federal provincial agreement is scheduled to expire? The other is looking for a definition of quality. And I'm also looking for what changes have been made to licensing and inspection practices since all the kerfuffle going on in Calgary. So I would like to move on to workforce. So most recent annual report, 22-23, page 19, and I quote, having qualified ECEs is a key predictor of quality in early learning and child care programs. Okay, so there's that word quality again. So again, if we could get that defined, that would be great. Did you know, Mr. Speaker, level 1 early childhood educator makes about $4 fewer an hour than is needed just to have a living wage. Oh, and that's including our wage top-up. Yeah, which I believe is captured in budget line 5.2, but that would be a question to the ministry as well. Another question to the ministry through the chair is, why do we pay our level 1 ECs so poorly so that they have to pick up a second job just to have a living wage? We have designed, the government has designed its own free online training for folks who wish to enter into the ECE level 1s. So my understanding is that it covers some of the basic materials that a babysitting course would, without any hands-on experience. So if the minister through the chair can provide more insight into that online training, that would be great. I would love to hear how it was developed, which experts were consulted, how the program has been validated to ensure that our children are being protected and well cared for. Page 18 of the annual report, 22-23, shows an enrollment increase in capacity spaces, moving it from 4,000 to 10,000 spaces. Can the ministry, through the chair, share the current enrollment and graduate numbers for this program? 5.2 in the budget, same line, has the program to becoming level 1. Also is where you find the funding for supports for ECs wanting to move to the next level. So this requires post-secondary certification, which I believe is also in line 5.2. Can the ministry, through the chair, provide further detail as to the allocations of fund to the different programs? Has funding increased sufficiently, for the demand we are seeing in our care centers? And of course, stability and consistency are two highly sought-after qualities when choosing a workplace or a new career. What actions has the ministry taken to stabilize the childcare system? Would the ministry consider what has been successful in other provinces? Nova Scotia introduced group benefits and pension package for ECEs. British Columbia, where they have an opt-in program, which is of course different than Alberta, which is on all or nothing. Manitoba, they created an early childhood educators wage grid, which of course presents stability for workers and a clear path. Or, Mr. Chair, would the minister work with the education minister and explore expanding high school dual credit to include and encourage entry into the ECE field, or even present a focus the same way as earlier was described for skilled workers, or even proactively co-spacing childcare centers with grade schools? Through the chair to the minister, what initiatives are being considered and planned to stabilize these workers for the childcare industry? And I want to circle back to safety. You'll recall earlier that when discussing quality and safety, I mentioned that some of the, slum-like conditions that we're seeing in some of our care centers. Further, when specifically the staff for the care center with the mice and the cockroaches were interviewed, they had little to no basic food handling knowledge. So, Mr. Chair, to the ministry, what concrete actions are being done, what is being planned, and where are they seeking expert advice to make childcare safe? On this last bit, I want to talk about Alberta's calling attraction bonus. So we've talked a little bit about the $5,000 tax credit. Sounds like a fantastic opportunity to bring vital workers. ECEs are vital workers. I understand we've got lots of, or the ministry has spoken about different incentives they have. However, this one would make a huge difference in these folks' lives. So can the minister, through the chair, confirm that ECEs are not eligible? And if not, why? And let's see. So we had, there was a mention of the ratios of E1, E2, A3. Can the ministry confirm what their goals are? What we're going to see in the next year relative to what's going on right now? There is an increase of almost $75 million to support the childcare workforce. So my question is, what does that get us? Mr. Chair, to the minister. And yes, I would like those answers. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, I called it the rapid fire round, and now you can see why. Well done, MLA. Minister, over to you.
Thank you. So the first question was, what is the plan post 2026 for the agreement? The indication from the federal government, the only indication that I've seen is that they will continue funding at the final level of the agreement. But certainly those are discussions that we are engaged in with the federal government because it's a good question. We need to know so that we can plan our side of the partnership, and we also need to factor it into the long-term cost control framework for operators. But Alberta is committed to high-quality, accessible, safe and inclusive childcare. So since the federal government is also committed to that, I'm optimistic that we can find a long-term partnership that will continue to provide that for Alberta families. As to definition of quality, a lot of this flows from the quality of our early childhood educators. They're professionals, and as I touched on earlier, we have added 47% to our ECE workforce, about 8,500 ECEs, and they are more educated than ever. In other words, more are level 2 and level 3, a higher proportion are level 2 or level 3 than at 3 years ago. To support ECEs to reach high levels of certification and advance their careers, Alberta's government provides up to $4,300 in professional development and release time funding per ECE per fiscal year. Funding assists with approved post-secondary tuition and textbooks and approved conferences or workshops for eligible ECEs. It also includes release time funding to allow certified ECEs to be paid while studying, completing post-secondary coursework, and attending workshops or conferences that have been approved for professional development funding. $839 million is allocated over the next 3 years to support quality initiatives and the licensed childcare workforce. A number of longer-term workforce strategies are underway to help ECEs reach higher levels of certification and advance their careers, including increased wage top-ups based on certification level, effective January 2023. This is in addition to changes in October 2022 to expanded hours eligible for wage top-ups to include indirect and paid vacation time. In December of 2022, certified ECEs employed in October and November received a bonus based on their hours of work, and expanded eligibility for the child care orientation course was put in place to allow any Canadian citizen to take the course, and enrollment capacity was expanded from 4,000 to 10,000 spaces. We've been working with Advanced Education to improve access to and successful completion of post-secondary programs, and we've modernized level 1 of the EC orientation course content to include new modules for out-of-school care and family day homes. We're exploring a new competency-based approach to certification, which would assess and factor in ECE's experience, knowledge, and skills, as well as their educational background. And we're launching pilot programs with diverse communities to promote their entry into the childcare field. And we're conducting recruitment campaigns for certified ECEs. We've also invested $22 million to support all licensed childcare operators with increased costs for mandatory employer contributions as a result of increases to wage top-ups for ECEs implemented in January 2023. So educated and experienced ECEs are the foundation of a high-quality childcare system and have a crucial role in ensuring the safety and well-being of children in their care. I wanted to touch on we have a panel reviewing the E. coli outbreak. It's headed by former Police Chief Rick Hansen, and they are working directly with Alberta Health and AHS to ensure that food safety is stronger across the board, but also as it relates to childcare facilities. And I'm looking forward to the recommendations that come out of that work. They are consulting with, again, medical experts, our healthcare system, the affected families, and they're going to come to the government with recommendations for the Health Act, and also as it relates to the licensing and regulation of childcare facilities. And I think there's also going to be learnings for municipalities in there. So we're going to do everything that we can to improve the safety for everybody in the province as it relates to food safety, but in particular for children in our childcare facilities. You'd asked how many people are taking the Level 1 ECE course, Tanis. Can you shoot that number?
Yes, so the Level 1 ECE course, there was an increased.
That could be submitted later or perhaps in a different block. Over to the government caucus now.
Thank you.
MLA Dijon, you have caught my attention.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you through the Chair to the Minister. Minister, I'd like to continue the dialogue from last time, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. And just to comment on something you mentioned during our last discussion, I just want to reiterate my support for the good work you've been doing, and I'm particularly excited about the investment of de Havilland Canada and Wheatland County, as that is in my constituency. So thank you to yourself and the team for helping that come to fruition. I wanted to discuss now the export expansion program. During your opening statement and again during our last dialogue, you spoke about the trade missions that you've been able to go on, both to Japan and to the Middle East recently, and it's exciting to hear that you have about 24 trade missions planned for the upcoming year. That's incredible. And the purpose is then to sell other countries on Alberta and what we produce. And the Alberta Export Expansion Program is another tool in bringing Alberta-made products to the world, and it's noted in the business plan in the initiatives supporting key objectives under Outcome 1 with a budget of $1 million. So, Minister, why is this program necessary? Should businesses not be able to support themselves in their operations, including selling their products globally? And perhaps in answering that, you can address a bit as how does this program work and how this program has changed to meet the needs of Alberta businesses?
Good question. So my ministry provides support to small and medium-sized businesses through the Alberta Export Expansion Program, or AEP, as we call it. With a $1 million annual budget, AEP provides funding to export-ready small and medium-sized businesses to travel to global markets to promote their products, make business connections, and explore partnership opportunities. It allows companies to the boost they need to get their products out to the world. And when you travel to these other jurisdictions, the successful Alberta companies who have established business relationships and are exporting or doing business in the region, they'll tell you that you need to have a presence, and it needs to be a sustained presence. And programs like AEP really take the edge off and enable good Alberta manufacturers and other companies to explore whether they can build a business, an export business with that region. So the AEP program provides funding to help support costs for Alberta businesses and nonprofits targeting foreign markets. This includes support for international travel to trade missions for export-ready businesses, industry associations, Indigenous communities, and economic development organizations. A similar program, Can Export, exists at the national level. However, it features higher minimum expense thresholds to qualify for support, and its intake has been very limited for 23-24. Additionally, over 80% of AEP applicants are not eligible for Can Export because they do not meet the minimum expense threshold. The AEP program was fully subscribed in 23-24, so much so that we had to close intake. This is actually great news. To me, this means that after a couple of years of decreased travel and limited in-person engagements, there are Alberta exporters who are seeing a resurgence in demand for their products and services. So we've been working hard behind the scenes to review the program based on the feedback we've received, and we plan to relaunch the program in April with a few changes. These changes will reduce red tape, clarify application guidelines, and streamline administration, and bring about more predictability and consistency, all while making sure the appropriate checks and balances are in place. To streamline the program and add predictability to companies, we will be leveraging per diems rather than requiring receipts. Per diem allowances will help offset flight costs, accommodations, intercity travel, and translation costs. It will also create consistency in grant amounts and how the program is used. We will also be removing the pre-travel grant agreement step and replacing it with applying to the program post-travel. This reduces administration and paperwork for companies, so they have more time to focus on growing their business. The one-stage post-travel process will speed up approvals and reimbursement of payments. We are also supporting attendance at formal events such as conferences and trade shows that will be supported at 50% of receipted entry fee. We will include a budget tracker on the AEP landing webpage to increase predictability of funding available for companies. We will also be allowing organizations up to an average of 3 or 4 funded missions per year at about $3,500 per mission, for a total of a maximum of $15,000 per organization per year. By making these changes, we're ensuring companies can use their time to build businesses and focus on exporting to new markets instead of filling in paperwork. This will also mean companies receive their reimbursements faster so they can redeploy those resources sooner. We will continue to monitor the program and see how things are working so we can continue to make any needed adjustments to ensure it is providing good value for Albertans. Further details about the revamped program, including how to apply, will be released when the program reopens in April, and I look forward to seeing which leading-edge companies we will get to work with over the coming year, and I look forward to continuing to enhance Alberta's trade and export ecosystem.
Thank you, through the chair, to the minister for your answer. And now, changing the tune a bit here to the film television tax credit. It's been difficult to turn on the TV or go into a movie theater in the past year without seeing Alberta on display for the world to see. In fact, Calgary has won the Location of the Year award at the 2023 Cannes Film Festival in France. The Last of Us, which I'm a big fan of, has been filmed at 180 locations across Alberta. And page 3 of the business plan identifies delivering client-centered programs and tools to support Alberta's economic growth and diversification, including the film and television tax credit as a key objective. That's 1.2, to support Alberta's economic growth and diversification. The business plan also identifies $105 million in funding to be allocated to that tax credit. So can you explain how this tax credit works and the benefits that it brings to the film and television industry in Alberta? And perhaps as a supplemental that you might be able to speak to as well, is how's your ministry grown Alberta's film and television industry over the recent years?
Thank you for the question. So to provide a bit of background, the FTTC offers a refundable Alberta tax credit of 22 or 30% on eligible Alberta production and labor costs to corporations that produce films, television series, and other eligible screen-based productions such as documentaries in the province. Productions applying for a 30% tax credit must meet additional eligibility requirements related to copyright ownership, producer residency, and ownership, among other things. To be eligible, total estimated production costs, the sum of Alberta and non-Alberta costs, must be greater than $499,000. Since the launch of the FTTC,
I hesitate to interrupt, Minister. We have come to a conclusion at the time of the meeting, so I apologize for interruption. I just want to thank everybody honestly for keeping their sticks on the ice, such a good calm demeanor, and getting your questions out there and answered. I'd like to remind committee members that we're on schedule to meet tomorrow morning, or tomorrow I should say afternoon, March 19th, 2024 at 3 p.m. to consider the estimates of the Ministry of Ag and Irrigation. Again, thank you everyone for this, and meeting adjourned.